to town!
Whoa, can you turn the volume down a bit?
Sorry, James, it's a really close game.
Oh, I didn't think you liked sport.
No, yeah, I did. I don't anymore. I like it. I respect the athleticism. I enjoy the contest. I enjoy muscular men, only because I want to be one. I respect the narrative. I pay my taxes, you know.
What are you talking about?
Sucked in, buddy, on your bike.
All right, that's it. We're throwing out this TV if you're going to carry on like this.
No, sorry, James. I'll be good. I'm calm.
All right.
That's how it feels, Nupty!
Well, what are you watching?
It's competitive snooker.
Jeez, that seems like a bit of an overreaction.
You'll never understand my love for coloured balls.
I didn't know you were such a snooker fan.
I didn't either until I discovered it just now.
Yeah, watching it obsessively, screaming at the television.
Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast by the Greensboro Commander community. It's the GCP by the GCC and POG, Palms Off Gaming, sponsor of this podcast. We're all uniting forces to help you to have better games of Commander. I'm your host, Walt.
And hello, Commander players. I'm your other host, James. Now, I see the flashing green light in front of us, but before we open the file and hear from the terrifying Space Commanders, I just wanted to remind everyone, if you like what we do and want to support the show, the best way to do it is by signing up to our Patreon. There's a bunch of really cool benefits, including becoming a Space Commander yourselves and commanding Walt and I for an episode recommendation. We can't wait to get to our first command from a new member of the Space Commanders. So if you're interested in that, you can head to patreon.com/getcommandedpodcast.
That's true. But without further ado, we do have an incoming transmission from the deep depths of the galaxy, from the Space Commanders. It's time to get commanded.
Each colour in Magic the Gathering has strengths and weaknesses, but all Commander decks must be capable of removing threats. Identify the strongest spells in each colour identity when it comes to removing a single target, but also en masse on a board-wide scale.
The removal episode.
The removal episode.
This is interesting because we've covered removal before. We've talked about it in context to responding to threats.
Yes, we
did.
did.
We've talked about it in regards to building your deck. But now we're just doing a big old deep dive.
Yeah, I guess the thing that those other episodes probably were lacking is like just our favourite spells. Because that seems like what they want, right? They wanted us to give...
Well, the best ones.
Yes,
which is
identify
the
strongest.
Which is going to be our favourites.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously never make missteps when we build decks.
No, we are actually the best Commander players in existence. And that's why we have a podcast. It's why we... That's real, right? We're good at this game?
Why do the Space Commanders want to hear from us is what I've never understood.
Literally sat in a bedroom in Australia somewhere, like, who cares?
Look, we'll give our favourites. Obviously, there's two broad camps when it comes to removal. And they specifically identified these two. They said they wanted to talk about the best ways to deal with targets.
Single target
removal. And also they wanted to deal with the board en masse, I think is what they said. So they're talking about board wipes there, I think.
I also didn't know the Space Commanders could speak French, which is really cool.
Ooh. I wonder if they got if there's like a French Space Commander.
Do you reckon there's a French Get Commanded podcast where there's like a French James and Walt?
Hello, welcome to Get Commanded
podcast. That's gotta be bad. We're going to catch flack for that. I'm sorry to any French listeners that we have.
Yeah, I've looked at the chart before of our listeners. Not seen French yet. Maybe it'll tick up.
Definitely not going to have one after that. All right, so which one do you want to start with? Single target en masse.
Let's talk about board wipes.
Board wipes?
Let's do board wipes first. So we've talked about these before. You mentioned it already in the deck building episode.
Yeah.
Episodes.
Multiple.
There were a few of them. I think it was episode 2. We did a lot of talk about removal. But to make that very, very short, we recommended that each deck has 1 to 5 board wipes, also sometimes called wraths. We'll probably call them wraths in this episode after the card Wrath of God, which is kind of the original version of this effect. we're basically talking about any spell that deals with all of something. So the most common examples are going to be, like Wrath of God, Day of Judgment kind of things, which is destroy all creatures.
Usually the card will say the word all on it, like literally ALL, that's a wide effect.
Yes.
So it depends, because 1 to 5 is a pretty big range of, like, in a deck building template. So it's kind of up to you how many board wipes you want to run.
Yes.
Generally, if you're in a, like, super creature-based deck, you don't want to be wiping the board of creatures all that often, because you're killing your game plan.
Yeah, if you're playing a token deck, like, you're probably going to have the biggest board. So a board wipe is just going to naturally be less strong in that deck.
Well, it's hurting your strategy. But, like, if, again, like, it's same line, if you're in like a super fast deck that's going to try and win before turn 7, turn 6, you're not going to want to be wasting your time casting a board wipe to reset everything. So if you're in those kind of strategies, have a think about how many board wipes you want to run. It's probably less.
Yeah, but I reckon 1 to 2 in most of those kind of decks. Whereas, closer to the 5 end of that range is going to be any decks that are like more control-y. So if you sort of want to win in the late game, these are going to be, you're going to want more of them. And also definitely decks that don't necessarily need their creatures very much. So Enchantress decks are really good for this. Super Friends decks that rely on winning with Planeswalkers, often have like 5, if not more, Wraths, because like most...
Got to protect those Planeswalkers.
Yeah, protect the Planeswalkers, and the best way to do that is removing all the creatures. So
but also, like, think about like what types of things you're hitting all of. We're going to talk about creature-based board wipes, but there are also artifact-based board wipes and enchantment board wipes.
And also, even blue ones that will return all non-land permanents to their hands as well, for sure.
Bouncy.
That's sort of the range. I reckon most decks probably want 2 to 3.
Yeah, if you're starting to build a deck and you're like putting the pieces together, I generally start with 2 or 3, and then I'll kind of play test and then go, maybe I want more. Actually, I probably don't even need 2. I can just run 1 or...
And as we said in the deck building episode, the rules are supposed to be your starting point. So equally, if you're very new to Commander, just start with 2 or 3.
Yeah,
and
I think that's
you
good
will
advice.
gradually work out which decks want more or which want less.
Well, I reckon we should probably consider, because the Space Commander wanted us to look at each color, but just before we dive into the Wooburg order, thinking about like the color pie.
Yeah.
There are particular colors that are very, very good at removal
Yes.
in particular circumstances, and there are particular colors that are pretty shit at removal.
Especially when it comes to specifically board wipes, we get like a really interesting breakdown where we're going to go through all the colors, but white is just comfortably the best at removing everything. Has so many creature-based board wipes, so many artifact enchantment board wipes. Like, you will never run out of options in white.
If you want to understand why, go and listen to the philosophy episode on white.
Love it. Black and red are okay. They're reasonably good, but usually only deal with certain things. And blue and green are usually the worst. Blue does have these spells that return all non-land permanents to their owner's hands, and some of those are really, really good, and we'll go into those in a little while as well.
But generally, blue and green are winning without board wipes, so it doesn't matter anyway.
That's true. But look, if you really, really needed one, we're also going to talk about a couple of colorless board wipes that you can use. So they can go in any deck, but generally sort of think of these as the tiers. So like, if you're playing a deck that's white, blue, and green, you should be playing the white board wipes, because they're going to be the best versions of
ones.
the effect.
Yeah, exactly.
Generally speaking.
All right, well, when we're going to dive into our like colors in a second, I want to just kind of have a bit of a preface here of there are generically good board wipes in colors.
Yes.
But then there are certain things that we're particularly looking for when we're kind of evaluating what options we have. And I think one of the key things for me, we've talked about this a lot before, is modality and options.
Yeah.
I love cards, especially when they're part of our, what we call our essentials in our deck building. So like our card draw, removal, and kind of ramp categories, like our essentials. If you have options to use it as removal or as this or as part of your deck strategy, that's the gravy. It is incredible. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also being able to, like, some of them, so Farewell is a good example.
Farewell's a great example.
Farewell, you can choose any number of them. And so you can sort of customize the board wipe for what you sort of want to use it for.
So like if you've got a huge board of creatures and don't want to remove all the creatures, then you can exile everything else.
Yeah.
Or if you have no creatures and you've got a board full of enchantments, but everyone else has got a ton of creatures, blow them all up.
Yeah, no, Farewell is really, really amazing for that reason. I think it's good to have, because there will be board wipes that we'll talk about that only hit certain card types. If you can, try to have at least one that hits all creatures, I think.
For sure.
It's most of the time going to be the thing you want to blow up.
Yeah.
Like, there are exceptions, obviously, but usually when you board wipe, you want to get rid of all of the creatures.
Because you know what is a creature? Usually your commander.
Yeah.
So, like, if your opponents have commanders, it's worth probably getting rid of them at some point.
I would say so. The other thing we're going to be looking at, and this is going to factor in a lot when we start talking about which wraths we think are generically good and which we think are good in specific circumstances, is mana value. So generally speaking, the ones that are just generically good are the ones that cost a small amount of mana. For wraths, the sort of going rate is usually about 4. That's just a generically good board wipe.
Wrath of God is the signpost card for this, because it's literally called Wrath, and it's 2 and white for destroy all creatures that can't be regened. It's like, that is the signpost of good in this category.
Definitely. And you even get a couple of board wipes that we'll talk about a bit later that actually cost less than 4, and those are crazy good. 5 is still fine for mana value, especially if it has some synergy with the deck, but some are just generically fine at 5. Like, especially if you don't have the money to afford the really, really generically good 4 mana wraths. Having a 5 mana wrath in there, like Cleansing Nova, for instance, destroys all creatures or destroys all artifacts and enchantments, it's perfectly serviceable. You won't be missing out that much by playing a 5 mana wrath.
I 100% agree. So, like, cards like, and when you said have synergy with the deck, I'm thinking of things like Slash the Ranks is great if you're in a Voltron deck, because you choose one creature of each opponent to, or it's the commander, isn't it?
Yeah, you keep everyone keeps their commanders and you get rid of everything else.
That's right. Yeah. So you keep your commander, which is your game plan, and everyone else loses everything but their commander, which might not be their win con.
Yeah.
Might just be their enhancer. So, like, if your board wipe is synergizing and progressing your game plan, 5 mana is totally serviceable.
Yeah, and even when you start to get to 6 mana wraths, if they're really, like, completely one-sided in terms of how they're used for you. Like, I'm looking at building an Enchantress deck. I'm probably going to disassemble my Sisay Enchantments deck.
I'm glad I got to play with it the other week. It was a good send-off.
And I'm thinking of building an illegal commander, a Nephilim. Which Wizards have explicitly said if Nephilim were printed today, they would be legendary.
Yeah.
But they're not. But I'm going to rule 0, make it legendary, basically. Anyway, I'm thinking of building it as an enchantment creatures deck.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a 6 mana wrath in black. I think it's 4 black. I forget what it's called, I'm afraid. But it says destroy all non-enchantment creatures. So if my deck is all enchantment creatures, that literally says 6 mana, destroy all creatures my opponents control. That's incredibly good.
That is so good. So yeah, like, one-sided board wipe effects are incredible. When you get to the 7 mana, you usually start seeing one-sided board wipe effects. But at this point, unless it is one-sided, you want to be avoiding this category. Because it is like spending your entire turn casting a board wipe for then everyone else to have priority on rebuilding their board before you do.
Yeah.
So you cast it on your turn, you pass to your opponent, they rebuild their board, another opponent rebuilds, you get back and you are now a turn behind.
Yeah. I think the one exception I would throw in here that's around this mana value is Necromantic Selection.
That's dirty.
Which does destroy everything, but you can keep something. This is one of the very, very few versions of a card that kills a commander and you can take it. It's very, very strange, but basically it destroys all creatures and you can choose a creature that was destroyed this way and you get it. Because there's no point in the resolution of the spell for the owner of the commander to choose to put it in the command zone.
Yeah.
You can nab someone's commander forever here.
So this is a really interesting effect on state-based actions, that they actually have to occur when the state-based action can occur, which in midway through resolving a spell, a state-based action cannot be put on the stack.
So spells always resolve all the way through, and then effects get put on the stack.
And then, that's when state-based actions are checked after a spell is resolved.
Yeah,
so
when priority resumes.
Yeah, it's a bit of a dirty one, but I reckon we're nearly 10 minutes into this episode. I reckon we start slamming in to the colours. Should we do Wooburg order?
Let's do Wooburg order.
Sure, starting off with white.
Yes, white. As we said, white has a million options. So these are just some of them. There will be, basically for every deck, there is a white wrath that is perfect for it. But if we're talking about generically good ones, Wrath of God we talked about. Tragic Arrogance is one that I think is probably not played enough. This is the 5-mana one where for each player, the person who casts the spell chooses an artifact, enchantment, creature, planeswalker. They sacrifice all other non-land permanents they control.
There's a bit of a cheeky play you can do with this as well. So if someone has a Esper Sentinel, for example, you can choose, if you're casting Tragic Arrogance, you can choose Esper Sentinel as the artifact and as the creature that they keep.
Yes, so they will sacrifice every other artifact and every other creature that they control, which means that you've basically like cheated the spell a little bit because they're supposed to keep one there. Tragic Arrogance is great. It's like completely resets the board. Sometimes, someone has one enchantment that's really amazing and so you can't deal with that. Because it's the only one that they have. But most of the time, this will at least set back your opponents. And because you choose all your best stuff and all your opponent's worst stuff. It's really, really, really good.
Yeah. Vanquish the Horde is another pretty good one. This is it's similar effect to Blasphemous Act, where it reduces the cost of it depending on how many creatures there are in play.
So I think it's 8, typically. Like, it's 6 white, but it costs 1 less for each creature. So, like, when are you not going to have 6 creatures on the board
in
when
a
you want to board wipe?
game?
And when you want to board wipe as well.
Exactly.
Like, usually the board is super gunged up at that point. At which point, it's white, destroy all creatures.
2 mana, destroy all creatures. That's insane.
We talked about how good 3 is. 2 is just, like, next level.
It's pretty insane. And, like, again, for another reason why something can be so good, Austere Command. This is 6 mana, but it is really modal. You get to choose 2 options, and there's destroy all creatures with power 3 or less, or 4 or more.
I think it's mana value.
Mana value, sorry, not
mana
power.
value 4 or greater, 3 or less. Yeah.
And then there's artifacts and enchantments, so you can choose 2 of any of those 4 options. So you just like sculpt it to make it the best result for you.
Oh yeah, and in certain decks, like it never hits your board. So like if you're playing a weenies list that has like a million small creatures on there, and then you just go like, okay, cool, destroy all creatures with mana value 4 or greater, and
that's
all
everything
artifacts.
That's threatening to me, and nothing of mine loses.
Yeah. So it can be like absolutely insane.
I got a couple of whiteboard wipes before we move on to blue that like I think is super underrated. There's a new one that's just come out from Phyrexia Orbi one.
Sure.
It's White Sun's Twilight. Have you seen this card?
This is like the better Martial Coup, right?
Yeah, very similar to Martial Coup, which I also did used to play too, but I think White Suns gets there just a little bit more. Basically, it's X white, where you make X 1/1 Phyrexian Might tokens.
So these are the ones that can't block and they have Toxic 1.
Correct.
So if they do combat damage to a player, they get a poison counter as well.
Which we all know if you get 10 or more, you die.
Yes.
But White Sun says if you cast X for a mana value of 5 or more, so it ends up being 7, you board wipe, but you keep all of the Phyrexian Mights that you take. Now, the reason why I think this is actually a little underrated, I know we said 7 is like, you should avoid it, but for 7 mana, you effectively have a win con on board when you cast this. You know how I was saying before about how like you give everyone else an opportunity to catch up before you do? If they don't catch up in time, these Phyrexian Mights could very well kill someone in the right deck.
Absolutely. And I think also, like, that's only if you're casting it for 5. Like, you could cast it for 10, and then you have lethal on someone, assuming they don't get blocks down. Definitely better than Martial Coup, I would say. For that one. I also really like Ondu Inversion. This is the one that's
land on the back.
Yeah, so this is way overcosted. It's like an 8 mana destroy all non-land permanents. But on the other side, it's a land.
So you can take out a basic planes for this.
You can. Don't take out too many of those. But you can take out one basic planes for Ondu Inversion, for sure.
I mean, there's heaps. Like, Urza's Ruinous Blast is another one that's really good in certain decks.
Yeah, so this exiles all non-land permanents. All non-land permanents that aren't legendary.
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically all legendaries go bye-bye, and it is a legendary sorcery, so you do need to have a legendary permanent on field to cast it.
Yeah.
But the Legends Matter archetype has gotten really strong recently.
Yeah.
Joda Archmage Unifier, like all of these like legendary matters commander, like the 5-color one that was the Precon, Painbow, I think it was nicknamed. Like there are a lot of permanent legendaries that kind of enhance legendary permanents even more.
Oh yeah, there's a few decks kicking around. We obviously have Captain Sisay's one that's like been around for a while. But even Planeswalker decks,
they're all legendary permanents.
Yeah, or Shrines also likes this card a lot. Yeah, so lots of legendary stuff matters these days. I also really like, for the right deck, Single Combat.
Oh, that's...
This is the one that destroys all creatures and planeswalkers except for... Everyone chooses one,
Everyone gets to choose one, and then it's got some kind of clause, like you can't cast creatures...
You can't cast creatures... no one can cast creatures until the end of your next
Yeah.
turn. So it does set you back quite a lot because you can't cast any creatures that turn or your next turn.
But if you're in a Voltron deck,
oh yeah, you don't care.
this is brilliant.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, in the Voltron deck, it's absolutely amazing.
But they're like white. We could spend ages talking about white.
There are so many.
There are hundreds and hundreds of these, and like I think generally, if you want to see some more options, Scryfall is a great resource.
Yeah.
Go and have a look.
Definitely. I will also say, like, our Moxfield lists are in the for all of our Commander decks are in the show notes for
Except
every
my
episode.
Zaxara list. I'm rebuilding.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
We'll be back soon.
Yeah.
But you can go and have a look, and I know that I don't know about your decks, but I know all of my decks are tagged, and so if you just go to sort by tags, you can look under all mine are tagged as board wipe. So if you just look at my board wipes list, you'll see which wraths I'm playing in which decks, and you can see how many as well.
Mine are the exact same.
Oh, cool. Yeah, there you go. So let's go to blue then, I guess.
Amazing.
So this is one of the colors that we said was slightly worse at it.
It struggles.
There's some exceptions. Probably, arguably, one of the best wraths in the format, Cyclonic Rift.
Yeah, it's funny that it struggles, yet Cyclonic Rift is objectively the best version of a board wiped effect because it is instant speed. It is one colored pip, so it can go in a lot of decks.
Yeah.
7 mana, it's a lot, but it's completely one-sided. All non-land permanents to the opponent's hands.
Yes, so you keep all yours, but all your opponent's non-land permanents get bounced, and it's an instant. So before your turn, you can go, okay, all your stuff goes bye-bye, untap, go about my business as per usual.
If you are in blue and want a very efficient board wipe, this is your choice.
And if you have a lot of money.
Yes, yeah, true.
It's about $50 at the moment, I think. They actually weirdly recently also got phasing of Zalfir.
This is a saga.
This is a saga, but it has read ahead where you can choose how many lore counters it enters with.
So you basically choose one of the effects on it to start with.
Yes,
Yeah.
and one of them, I think it's a 5-mana enchantment saga. I think one of them just says destroy all creatures.
Which is really weird for blue.
It is really weird for blue. But look, I guess it's a new tool in the arsenal. But yeah, if you just straight up want to destroy everything in blue, Phasing of Zalfir is a great choice for you, definitely.
I mean, there's like blue does board wipes in the bounce way. So like Phasing of Zalfir is really odd, but like
it's an exception, definitely.
Yeah, but there's like Coastal Breach, which is another really good example of like generic good bounce everything.
Yeah, this is like 4-mana sorcery, I think. So like it's on rate.
Yeah, it's got Undaunted, so it's like it gets cheaper with multiple opponents.
So it says it costs 6 in a blue, but if you have 3 opponents, which you often will in a Commander game,
it's like 4 mana.
Yeah, 4 mana,
which is totally fine.
Totally serviceable. Yeah.
There's a couple of ones that I really like in blue as well.
So sort of the same bounce kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, similar. But this one gives you a really good effect afterwards. Crush of Tentacles.
Oh,
do you remember this card?
This was an all-star in the very early James and Walt at the kitchen table games.
It definitely was. It
won some games, I reckon.
Bizarre. Well, so it's a Surge mechanic. So Surge says if you've cast a spell before this one, you can cast it for his Surge cost.
It actually says if you or an ally, like a player that is on your team,
because it was printed for
it's for Battle Bond, I think.
Yeah,
or one of those sets that cares about multiplayer.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you or like
a teammate
or what, I forget how they word it on the card. If you or a teammate has cast a spell this turn, then you can pay its Surge cost, and it's 5. Yeah,
3
blue.
3 blue for its Surge cost. So it's basically bounce everything.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you paid its Surge cost, you create an 8/8 octopus.
It's wild. Like,
it's really good.
In terms of these effects that just leave you with the ability to kill people, it's like gotta be one of the better ones.
And like if you're in a token strategy, or if you're in if you're in a Brutaclad deck, for example, this could be really interesting. You make you recast Brutaclad on your turn, make a mirror, make that mirror an 8/8 octopus.
I mean, your partner Theo plays a Bruno Stromkirk deck.
Yeah.
So yeah, this would also be great in that one.
Ties into that too.
Definitely. I like Flood of Tears also in this category. This is the 6-mana one that bounces all non-land permanents. But if 4 or more non-token permanents you controlled were bounced this way, you can put one onto the battlefield.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you've got like a 6-mana creature that's really, really good and you bounce everything, but then you've bounced 4 or more, you just get to drop the 6-drop, which is, again, doing the same thing of putting you ahead a little bit.
Yeah, I'm making a new Commander deck at the moment. I'm really excited to show everyone. It's Kaidel and
Karuga?
Karuga's the companion.
Oh, okay.
But there is there's another commander. So I've got 2 commanders and a companion, which is insanity. But it's basically main board, it's a big mana permanent deck. Right. That's the whole point. So Karuga's in the companion zone, so none of my spells are under 3 CMC.
Right. So you have to do that to have Karuga, right? Yeah.
So with this in the deck, Flutter Tears, it's incredible because I can just bounce everything and then slam one of my 8 drops that I cast last turn.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
I like that. Spectral Deluge is a similar effect. This one's actually one-sided. It has Foretell, so it can cost less. I think it's normally a 6-drop. It returns all creatures your opponents control that have, I think, mana value, or maybe it's power, less than the number of islands you control. So this is only really good in mono blue, because you want to have like 5-6 islands when you get this off, but this only hits your opponent's stuff. So
that's pretty good.
Can be really good.
I use Devastation Tide is a good one.
This is the one that has Miracle, so it can cost 1 in a blue, right?
I run it in Yuriko for some obvious reasons.
You can very easily stack the top of the deck in that.
Yeah, and like if you are manipulating the top of your library for 1 in a blue, bounce everything to everyone's hands, in a pinch, that is so handy.
Yeah, it's so cheap.
I have Vampiric tutored to put that on top of my library to reset the board before.
I like that a lot. Well, moving out of blue, black, I would say, probably sits slightly below white, but it's still very, very good.
And there are some like really strong blackboard white, like Toxic Deluge.
Arguably, probably in that top 3 best board wipes in the format, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's running CDH.
Yeah.
So, like, it is hyper efficient. It's 3 mana, but you pay life to give everything neg X.
Yeah.
Where X is the amount of life.
Yep, so you can go 2 in a black, it's sorcery, pay 9 life, everything gets -9/-9.
Which kills goddamn.
It's going to kill everything. Yeah, it basically always kills everything for 3 mana. It's crazy good. Yeah. Meat Hook Massacre is one they've printed recently.
Got banned in standard. That should tell you something.
Yes. X Black. This is the one that's actually an enchantment. And when it enters the battlefield, creatures get -X until end of turn. So whatever you paid for X. But then it stays, and the enchantment says whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you gain a life. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life. I believe it says that.
If you're an Aristocrats, this card is...
It's absolutely insane. It's a board wipe, and it's also basically... What's the 3 mana source enchantment from Ikoria? Bastion of Remembrance. Yeah. It's basically Bastion of Remembrance plus board wipe. It's so crazy good.
If you're looking for the best one-sided board wipe, probably just to say, like, destroy all opponents' creatures, it's in Garruk's Wake. This
one has Planeswalkers as well, I believe.
Oh, it does too.
Yeah, all creatures and Planeswalkers your opponents control. I think it costs 9.
It is ridiculously overcosted, but I run it in my Yaleva deck.
Right, so you can cheat the cost on that.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're in a deck that's like running ways to cheat out big mana spells, this is where you can look at 6, 7, even 8 drops and go, I can run this.
Yeah, totally. Definitely you can. Damnation is probably just like the on-rate Wrath.
It's literally Wrath of God, but black.
Yeah, I think it's actually color shifted specifically. Yeah. So it's from that set, I forget, Future Sight, where they basically printed a bunch of cards in not the colors they're normally in. But yeah, literally, it's Wrath of God. Destroy creatures that can't be regenerated, but it's 2 black instead of 2 white.
Torment of Hailfire can serve as a win con. It technically board
usually wipes. A win con, but yes, it's totally a board wipe as well. So it's the X black, make your opponent sack stuff, whatever. We don't like that card. Well, I don't like it anyway.
Well, in regards to sacking stuff, I actually think that like that is something to consider that black does really well. Like I run Necrotic Hex, which is this is in my zombies deck because it synergizes so well. So it's 5 and a black for a sorcery. Each opponent sacks 6 creatures they control. Sorry, each player sacks 6 creatures they control. Then you make 6 2/2 zombies.
Yeah, in terms of one-sided, you can't really get much better than that.
You're basically, and like especially in a zombie tribal deck, 6 2/2 zombies for 6 mana.
Oh yeah,
that is bonkers.
It's totally the rate you want. Speaking of tribal, Crux of Fate. This is
that's pretty brutal,
the dragon tribal one. So you choose either destroy all dragon creatures or destroy all non-dragon creatures. You're never destroying all dragon creatures.
Because you're playing dragons.
You're playing
Spoiler alert.
It's your 5 mana sorcery that kills all of the other stuff on the board, so you can get through and get that win. Massacre Girl.
Oh, I want to see someone build this as a commander.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's legendary.
It totally is.
You could just have a board wipe sat in your command zone if you wanted to.
It's so good. This is the one that ETBs, and each creature gets -1/-1 till end of turn, except for Massacre Girl. Yeah. And whenever a creature dies this turn, it does the same thing again. So if there's a 1/1 and a 2/2 and a 3/3, it's killing everything.
Yes.
Pretty much guaranteed.
I have only ever seen this hit the board once and not kill everything.
Really?
Yeah, I've only ever seen it once. I can't even remember what the creature was that it didn't kill, but I think it might have been like a 20/20 token or something like
that's
that.
fair.
But it was like pretty close to dead.
Yeah,
Like,
the thing people miss, I think, is that like once you start stacking these triggers up, more things start dying. So it's not like it's like you need 1/1/1 and 1/2/2, 1/3/3. You do need that to get it going. But then once you get to like 3, there might be like 10 creatures. And it's like, well, now everything's getting -12, -12.
yes.
So it's very hard to dodge at that point.
And it's 4 mana too, isn't it?
5
mana. So
but still, it's a creature though, so you can bring it back from your graveyard.
Also, -1/-1 gets around indestructible.
It
so
does.
That's something to say. Paying an extra mana to make sure you kill the
Ulamog.
Ulamog.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty good.
It's relevant more than you would think,
Yeah.
for sure. I also really like Living Death. This is just like a win con in
decks
a
that
mill
want it,
deck.
yeah.
So this is the one that basically I won't attempt the rules text because it's worded like crazy. It has to work like that for the rules to work. It basically just swaps everything that is currently on the battlefield with everything in everyone's graveyard. So everyone sacrifices all their creatures, brings back their whole graveyard, but not the cards they sacrifice.
Yeah, so if you're in a deck that is purposefully filling its graveyard, like
Yeah.
if you're playing Merrin or you're playing Arami,
Yeah.
which Walt runs this in both of those decks, like, this is perfect for you. You fill your bin, you have maybe one creature on your battlefield because you're sacrificing the rest of them there anyway. Everyone else is like, on turn 5, one creature in their bin, 10 creatures on their battlefield.
Yeah.
Oh, switch. Everybody switch!
Yeah. I win, basically, at that point. Yeah.
It is
Really
insane.
good.
All
Really
right,
strong.
Red's
pretty good. I think it's on the same level as black, I would say.
I think it's closely behind black, but there are some certain situations where like red does damage based stuff way better.
I mean, Blasphemous Act is probably one of the best wraths in that format, right? So this is the one that's
1 red, essentially.
basically.
That
So
can
it's
be.
8 and a red, it deals 13 damage to every creature, costs 1 less for each creature on the battlefield. So similar to when we're talking about Vanquish the Horde, just being able to, for 1 mana, effectively kill everything.
Yeah.
And then you get to continue your turn. You know, then you play out all your creatures. It's so strong. But then, after Blasphemous Act, you sort of drop down a tier a little bit in terms of what's good.
Blasphemous Act is like the top tier board wipe in red, and then like everything else is like, do you really need it?
Yeah.
But we also do have Vandal Blast in red.
Oh, yeah. So this is definitely better in like more high-powered tables, would you say?
For sure, but also like if you're running like absolutely, you know, something that maybe is really threatened by artifacts. I don't know what kind of deck that would be, but even in situations where, because artifacts are just so strong now, it's probably good to have a Vandal Blast in your deck. Vandal Blast is a single target artifact removal spell, but has Overload, which means you can destroy every artifact your opponents control, which is kind of insane for 4 and a red, so 5 mana. Artifacts are everywhere these days.
Oh, yeah. So many rocks, so many artifacts like commanders these days.
Yes,
as well.
true. I mean, if someone's playing that Urtet Mir commander, God, this absolutely hoses them.
I think I actually saw a game recently where Josh Lee Kwai was playing Urtet on Elder Dragon Hijinks, their channel.
The one, I did watch that.
And someone overloaded Vandal Blast, and Josh Lee Kwai was
that's me done.
Yep, I'm out of here, pretty much. I mean, he played the rest of the game, but he was not very good.
Look, I will make some arguments for red, that there are some board wipes in red that surprise me every single time I've cast them.
Sure.
For example, Brotherhood's End, which is the new Anger of the Gods. It's like
slightly better because it's got 2 modes.
So it's got Anger of the Gods effect, which is 1 red and a red, deal 3 damage to each creature.
Yeah.
But then Brotherhood End also has, you can destroy each artifact with CMC 3 or less.
Yeah.
Which, you would be shocked at how many times casting Lightning Bolt on every single creature on the board will kill a lot of things.
Absolutely. I mean, in a similar vein, I super rate the card Volcanic Torrent.
After seeing you cast this like multiple times now, I also super rate it.
So this is the one that's 4 and a red. It has Cascade, so you exile cards until you exile something that costs less than 5, and you cast that as well. And it says it deals X damage to each creature and planeswalker your opponent's control, where X is the number of spells you've cast this turn. So it always does at least 2, because it was going to cast Volcanic Torrent, it's going to Cascade and cast something else. So if you can cast 1 or 2 spells before this, get it up to doing like 3, 4, 5 damage to each creature only your opponent's control. So it's always one-sided. I've definitely basically wrathed the entire board, and my board is fine.
And also, the fact that it's one-sided is good, but also there are a lot of things that, like, play with when you cast something from exile. Like, there are a lot of Cascade decks out there. Like,
Totally.
you run it in your Cascade deck.
I do.
But if you run it in Prosper, you're making treasures as well.
That's true.
So, like, there is some really good utility for this card.
Absolutely there is, definitely. I also like, I think Chain Reaction is fine. It's not amazing. It's 2 red. It deals X damage to each creature, where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield.
It is on rate.
It's on rate. It's that 4 mana slot that we do like, but there are circumstances in which this doesn't do very much damage and or doesn't kill everything. So it's like, it's totally serviceable and fine, but yeah, like we said, red is sitting this slight tier below black and definitely well below white. So if you're playing those colors, stick with those instead.
Tell you what's even shitter than red?
What?
Green.
Green? Yeah.
Okay, but, like, green is Daddy Wizard's favorite child. Like, it gets everything. But the one thing that Wizards haven't given green straight up is really efficient good board wipes yet.
No,
and
not
I
for creatures.
really hope they don't.
No, it's like the one thing that they don't need.
Yeah.
It's like the only thing they don't have, and it should stay that way.
If green gets really efficient board wipes, it is just, like, if you play a mono green deck, you've got everything you need.
Yeah.
Everything. It's not like you're being punished for only having one color in your commander's identity.
I have my Mowu Loyal Companion deck, and, like, it's mono green, and I already feel like I have everything that I need. If I had a really, really great board wipe as well, I'd literally be like, this is stupid. Like, every other color is behind me right now.
It does do board wipes of enchantments and artifacts really well.
It
like,
does.
Fade from History, Bane of Progress are 2 that, like, immediately jumped for mind for me. Fade from History is adorable because it's got the bear cubs art.
And everyone gets a bear as well.
It's so, you cannot be mad if someone casts Fade from History.
No.
You cannot be.
4 mana destroys all artifacts and enchantments as well. So it's a great rate as well. Bane of Progress is slightly higher costed, but it's a creature, and it puts a bunch of +1 counters on it for everything that it destroys. It's not just like a 20/20. And it's
if
like,
you're just in a straight up creature-based deck and you're not running any enchantments, any artifacts, chuck a Bane of Progress in there, you'd be surprised how big this thing can be.
Definitely. I also have been playing, specifically in my Mowu deck, Wave of Vitriol. This is the one I pulled out and showed to you the other day. And you're like, what is this wild?
This is wild.
7 mana sorcery. Every player sacrifices all artifacts, enchantments, and non-basic lands they control.
Which is a bit mean.
It is a bit mean, but for every non-basic land that is sacrificed, its controller searches for a basic land and puts it on the battlefield tapped.
Which is less mean.
So you never end up with less mana than you had before, unless you run out of basics, which can happen.
But then you're punished for not running enough basics.
Exactly. But I played my mono green deck because I'm like, I mean, I'll get everyone to get rid of all their artifacts and enchantments. And also, I don't have almost any non-basic lands, so I don't get really hurt by this at all. The one I will say, like, generically good green board wipe, you have to say, is Azuru's Predation.
Oh, there's the one that makes 4/4 beasts.
Yeah, and then each beast fights a creature on the battlefield. Very, very strange to resolve.
It's like 6 mana.
I think it's 8. I think
Is
it's
it
5
8?
green,
Jeez.
green. Yeah.
Look, I've seen it cast a couple of times. I think it used to be a lot better than it is now.
Sure.
I think it's gotten a lot worse.
It's a high cost to pay, and Commander's definitely becoming a faster format.
And also, creatures are getting bigger. Like, creatures are now usually like 4/4s or 5/5s in Commander.
Yeah.
They're like all. It's really good because you make a bunch of tokens in the right strategy. Yes, having a bunch of 4/4s can win you the game, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think it's amazing, but it's certainly, like, serviceable. Now, when we move into multicolored board wipes, we sort of get the best of both worlds usually.
Yes, usually this is where we start seeing like more color pip intensity, but better overall effect.
Yeah, totally. And you sort of get, like, the combined power of each of the colors. So if you combine the colors at the top of this spectrum of, like, how good the board wipes are, you get the best board wipes in the format. So Ruinous Ultimatum, for instance. This one is, I'm going to check. I think it's red, white, black.
I think you're right.
I believe. I'm pretty sure it's 3 white pips and 2 of each other one. So it's Mardu specifically. Destroys all non-land permanents your opponents control. So this card is insanely good. Very difficult to cast. So unless you were
right.
I was right?
Yeah, you were right. You got it.
Nice. If you can cheat it out, it's really, really good. And if you're just in Mardu, like if you're playing, a Sir Gwyn deck or a Queen Marchesa deck, and you can just justify the pips, it's incredible.
Yeah. And also, again, if you're in a like a I can cheat out big spells kind of deck.
Yes, totally. Like a Joda deck loves them, for sure.
This is incredible. Also, Time Wipe is one that was printed in War of the Spark.
Yeah, pretty sure it's War of the Spark.
It is really, really good. It's basically a bounce effect, so it's the blue side of things, but you get to choose one creature that doesn't bounce, right?
No, it destroys everything.
It destroys everything?
And you bounce one of your creatures.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's literally like Wrath of God, so 2 white, and a blue. So you add a blue pip in there.
So you get to basically cast Unsummon on one of your own creatures while you're casting Wrath of God.
Yes.
To protect that one creature.
But on the one card. So it's better that,
But usually pick your commander, and this is incredible.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely serviceable. Definitely very, very good. Last one standing is kind of funny and also quite good. Like, it's 3 mana. So it's 1 black, red. Yep. You choose a creature at random, and you destroy all the other creatures. It's just always hilarious. Nobody feels bad when you cast this spell, ever.
The artwork is also hilarious. It's a goblin standing on a pile of bodies holding a sword in the air. I'm like, I love this card. It's also 3 mana.
Yeah.
It's like
the rate
so
is
efficient.
Great. It's really, really good.
Also, highly recommend, if you've got a board with like heaps of tokens, just use Google random number generator to choose.
Don't be rolling dice for that. Yeah. People like pull out a d20 and be like, okay, if it's 1 to 17, we'll count clockwise around the table. If it's 18, 19, or 20, we'll roll again, but only on a Wednesday, and not if anyone feels funny about it, and we'll all drink tea.
And cry. Because the random number selection in Magic the Gathering sucks.
Yeah, it does suck. It does suck. I also really like Culling Ritual. I think this is much better in higher powered games.
Yeah, this is a CDH staple, actually.
Yes, so it's 2 black, green. Destroy all non-land permanents with mana value 2 or less. Add a black or a green for each non-land permanent destroyed this way. So mostly this is played in CDH, often in like the kind of decks that are playing ad nauseum.
Yes.
Because it gives you ad nauseum mana while stopping a bunch of interaction, a bunch of stuff from your opponents.
It also gets rid of like every fast mana rock.
Oh yeah,
available.
It's hitting Crypt, it's hitting Sol Ring, it's hitting all the Moxes. Like it's really, really incredible. Not so good in casual, I would say. Maybe if you were playing high-powered casual commander, it might be pretty good because they're probably going to see more of those fast rocks and mana dorks and stuff. But
I see a world where you can build around this card, where you can build it in a token strategy to cast a huge Torment of Hailfire just for the sake of it. That's an interesting way of building it.
If you were playing Karuga,
oh,
it would actually be pretty good. If it was like a Karuga deck that had black.
Like a Sultai Karuga deck. Ooh, I like it.
Ooh,
dirty.
That's fun. That's fun. Kai's Wrath is another one that comes to mind.
This is a bit evident of when you combine white and black.
Yes, so it destroys all creatures. You gain life for each 1 life for each creature destroyed this way. So in life gain, incredible.
You've also got like Merciless Eviction, which is a little bit worse than Farewell because it gives you the same options, but you can only choose one.
Yes,
but this is again showing you that it's like white and black combined gives you an exile effect over destruction effect, and it does it wide, it does it efficiently. It's really strong.
Definitely. Now I have one that I would like your thoughts on.
Sure.
I have some thoughts, but I might share them after I hear from you about it. There's a blue-white Wrath that's not time wipe. It can't be countered.
Oh, I know what one you're talking about.
So 1 white, blue. It's called Supreme Verdict. It destroys all creatures, and it can't be countered. So look, it's 4 mana, like Wrath of God.
Yeah.
And it can't be countered, but it's more mana intensive. What's your overall feeling on Supreme Verdict?
It's fine.
It's fine?
It's fine. Like, if you're an Azorius and you're playing, like a more control-y build, sure, go for it. But I think people get so excited when they see this spell can't be countered. In a casual format, like what we play most of the time, the chances of someone countering it are actually relatively low. Unless you're meta, unless you know your playgroup really well, and they are running a lot of counter spells. In that situation, I would recommend this card.
Yes.
I would actually be like, go for your life. But I think that this spell can't be countered is slightly overhyped, specifically on Supreme Verdict.
I completely agree with you, actually.
Okay, wow.
I'm totally with you.
Right. I thought you were just being like, I love this card because I know it's going to resolve against you, James. I know that I'm not going to get countered.
I'm not going to lie, I did pick up a copy around the time that I was playing against your Niv Miss attack. Yes, I was like, please, I don't want to be countered this one time. Yes, I completely agree. I think in the right meta, it's going to be great. I think it's at a weird power level, though, where it's like, at lower power levels, you're not going to need it.
Wrath of God is the exact same spell at lower power levels.
Yes.
I can promise you.
Yes, and it's the important thing about Supreme Verdict is much more color pip intensive.
Which means you have to really sequence your tapping of lands well.
And you have to be probably in specifically white-blue to make sure you have the right pips and stuff. Like, it's going to be hard to cast this in a 3-4 color deck, etc.
I agree.
And then once you get to the really high-powered games, it's probably not efficient enough. You're mostly going to want to
it's-
play your Toxic Deluge
Yeah.
and your culling rituals instead.
I 100% agree. I think people get too excited by when they see that this spell can't be countered. But
Definitely.
if you are one of those people that goes, oh, my playgroup loves running counter spells, run this card.
Yep. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Now, important to mention, there are colorless options. So these are going to be especially good when you're in colors that are bad at wrapping the board. So green is the main one. Blue, to a certain extent, is the same. Generically good ones, especially in the right deck, all is dust. Oh my word.
Yeah, this is
if you're
Eldrazi monstrosity board wipe.
So it's a 7-mana sorcery that everyone sacrifices all permanents that are coloured, I believe.
Yeah. So a lot of people misunderstand this and think they have to sacrifice their lands.
No.
Lands are not coloured.
No, they
So,
don't have.
yeah.
They have colour identity for the
Yes.
purpose of Commander.
Yeah.
But yes, they are not themselves. Like a plains is not white
Yes.
for the purpose of the game. It's
It
very
is
strange.
technically a colourless permanent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very strange. Oblivion Stone, I think, is probably the best, just generically. Like, will go in a lot of decks
Yeah.
when you need it.
Also really good in some synergies as well. Like, I run Tornos, which is like a tap-untap type of synergy. Tornos loves Oblivion Stone.
Because you can copy the ability, the 4-mana ability that puts a fate counter on something. You can get 2 fate counters instead.
Yeah, so then when you activate the other ability of blow up everything without a fate counter,
Yeah.
I get to keep my 2 best
Yeah,
things.
this is the best way to use Oblivion Stone, really, is when you
Yeah.
know you can keep some stuff, and you can keep stuff much faster than everybody else
Yeah.
can, for sure. I can't talk about Oblivion Stone without shouting out my fave. Hilarious. Like Last One Standing. You can't feel bad about this. Boom Pile.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
It's a 4-mana artifact that says tap, destroy all non-land permanents. No, it doesn't. It says tap, flip a coin.
Yeah,
If you win the flip, destroy all non-land permanents.
It is absolutely 50-50 on whether or not it works.
Yep.
But I'll actually give you an example of where I found this deck working, found this card working in a deck really well. I
Sure.
went to Warrnambool just recently.
Oh, yeah.
And played with a bunch of guys down there.
Down on the coast of Victoria.
Yeah, beautiful spot. Great little work trip that I had to go down there to work with some different universities down that way.
Yep.
But there was a coin flipping deck that I was lent, and it had Boom Pile in it. And when you've got Krark's Thumb on board, this is a really, really efficient board wipe.
I like that. I like that a lot. I just like it for the funniness.
Yeah,
Because sometimes you pay 4 mana, tap it, nothing happens.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Yep, sorry everyone.
Bastard.
Maybe next time.
Yep.
Um,
Again, this is good if you're in a tap-on-tap synergy, like Tornos.
Oh, yeah.
I should probably run this in Tornos, actually.
oh, okay, you can copy the
Thinking about
ability.
it.
Yeah.
Copy the ability, get 2 chances.
It's tough though. It does destroy all non-land permanents, which like often you want, but in certain decks, like in an artifact deck,
Oh, yeah.
you almost would rather have the red rats that hit creatures only.
Yeah.
And keep all your artifacts. I don't know.
I think it would be bad of us not to say the actual best colorless board wipe.
Oh sure.
Ugin the Spirit Dragon.
Oh yeah.
That's like probably top tier.
It's crazy good. So this is the one
Yeah.
that's like it's like an 8-mana walker. I think it enters with like
6
6
loyalty. You can minus X loyalty from it and destroy each colored permanent with mana value X or less.
Yeah. So if it's got 6 loyalty, you can like downtick by 4. Everyone sacks all their permanents that are 4 or less.
Well, yeah, just
That are coloured.
just destroy
them all.
It's insane.
It's really, really good. Also, importantly, you keep it afterwards if you do it right.
If you do it right, and if you're in a Super Friends deck, you're running this card.
It's a crazy good card in every format, basically.
Yeah.
It upticks to Bolt. The
Oh, yeah, it
uptick
totally does.
is deal
Yeah.
3 damage to winning target.
So it's also single target removal sometimes.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a really, really
Yeah.
strong card, definitely. Well, that was a lot of talking
Yeah.
about board wipes.
As a bit of a preemptive move before we move into the next section, we
Sure.
know we're rattling off a lot of spells here. If you would like to discuss or debate any of these, jump in our Discord, because we're trying to get through as many as possible, so we're not going to be able to talk about all of them for 5 minutes each.
No.
But yeah, there's an opportunity for discussion here.
Yeah, we'd love to talk about it some more. And speaking of Discord, there is a recurring post that I have in our Discord server.
Happens on a Wednesday,
no,
Friday.
It's a thrifty Thursday, thank you. And speaking of, it is time for a thrifty interlude.
Ooh.
So we have lots left to cover, obviously. The targeted removal, all that kind of stuff. But before that, let's hear a little something about a card that I have my eye on, have my budget eye on, because it is thrifty. And as is tradition, I will bring the card to life in monologue form. So would you like to read the card I'll be featuring this week, James?
I'm very happy to, because it's on theme once again. You've outdone yourself. This card is an instant called Vanish into Memory. For 2 white and a blue, you exile target creature. You draw cards equal to that creature's power, and at the beginning of your next upkeep, you return the card to the battlefield under its owner's control. If you do, discard cards equal to that creature's toughness.
There is a tendency amongst Magic players to forget that which first drew us to the game. New sets are released, alternate frames, reprints. These are all cunning distractions from the true purpose of the game, to have fun. Time wears upon us, the maddening whispers of the game's creators grow too much to bear, and we slip into a tempestuous daze. But what if we could forget everything? Poof! Gone! Don't you want to be a stupid little baby? Wander around the living room, bumping into cupboards and screaming, "Help me! My brain is helplessly inadequate for the tasks with which I am burdened!" Start again, but with slightly more than you had last time. Like that ambiguous period after Iron Man 3 when Tony built new suits. Get budgeted!
Tempestuous. I love that word.
It's a good one.
It's a good word.
It's a
punchy
juicy one. Yeah,
but also,
tempestuous.
I'm also now just really concerned that everyone's going to think we have very limited pop culture references.
Awareness, yeah.
Which is like just Marvel, Star Wars, and
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, that's it. That's our trilogy.
That's the 3 genders. Yeah. If you'd like to see these as they are released in text form over on Discord, which is linked in the show notes. And you can see me bring some of these to life in video form over on TikTok at G_Commander Community. Now, we should get back to what we were talking about, which was removal. We sort of covered all the board wipes.
Yes.
That's done.
So mass, en masse was what the Space Commanders used, that fancy French word. But now we have to get into single target.
Yes.
Which is actually probably becoming more and more important in Commander these days.
Yeah, I think overall people are playing slightly fewer board wipes and slightly more targeted removal.
I'd say so.
I believe our recommendation from our deck building guide was 8 to 15 bits of targeted removal. In terms of where you want to sit within that range, 8 is going to be like a sort of a really fast deck that basically controls the board by just winning quickly. You don't really need the removal so much. And equally, if you were to be playing a lot of board wipes, you're just not going to need as much targeted removal. They kind of, one of them cancels out the other. If you're blowing
up everything, you're not going to blow up one thing after you blow up everything. Everything's already gone.
It's true. Also, decks, I think, that can reuse their removal can typically go lower on this. So if you've got a Ravenous Chupacabra in your graveyard Reanimator deck, it's very, very easy for you to get that back and use it again and again. So it's less 100%. Crucial that you have a really high number.
Yeah, I think that originally a lot of deck building guides, I think we even might have set it in ours, and then we kind of upped it to 15. But I think a lot of people generally heard the word 10. I mean, I know the Command Zone kind of gave the number of 10.
For a long time, yeah, they were at 10. Yeah.
I just think the type of cards that we're seeing in Commander these days are the single big threats that like this card could win on its own if it is not answered. So we need to be running these single target removal spells to make sure we can deal with this. But look, 10 is a perfectly serviceable middle ground. If you're building a brand new deck and you're brand new to Commander, 10 is just start with 10 and then feel your deck out. See if it needs more or less.
Sure. I would say probably if you're going to go either side of that number of 10, lean towards the 15 as opposed to the 8.
You're always going to... If you can stop your opponents winning, you're more likely to win. But if you can't stop them, they're going to win and you've got a very small chance of winning.
Yes.
So if you think about it in that context, yes, lean towards more than less.
Absolutely. So if we're looking for our, 8, 10, 15 bits of targeted removal, what are we looking for? Well, there's a few sort of check boxes we can tick off here. Different check boxes will tend to cancel out other ones. So basically, some of the things we'll be looking for, versatility is really good. So in general, try to avoid bits of removal that say, like, just destroy an artifact or just destroy an enchantment. It will depend on colors, which we will go into in a second as well. But if you can hit multiple different types of permanents, that's going to be the best way, bang for your buck, for sure.
For sure. I think the non-land permanent and permanent is something interesting to distinguish here.
Sure.
And we'll talk about, I know we're going to go through the colors later, but like there is a good reason why we could run permanent destruction spells,
Yes.
which includes lands, but
Absolutely.
there is a bunch of other things as well. There's if it synergizes with your deck, that is a huge thing. So
Yes.
if it also fits in the category of, you know, making bodies when you cast the spell,
Sure.
or which there are a bunch of spells that, you know, say destroy target creature, you make X/1/1 saplings or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
There are some spells that give you card draw, like Vanish into Memory, for example.
Yep. There's even some occasions where you might get ramp out of the spell as well. So yeah, like we talked about in our deck building guide originally, when you add up all the different numbers of things you need to have, you tend to get more than 100, but it doesn't matter because you're going to have things that tick multiple boxes.
Yeah, and on Moxfield, my favorite deck builder, you can actually make them fit all the categories.
You can indeed. You can indeed. Modality is going to be good as well. So if you can choose which options you want to use, so if it's got a few different options, you can kind of tailor it to the specific thing that you need. Like Sublime Epiphany is probably the best example in Commander at the moment. The best counter spell in terms of what it does. It costs you 6, but you get to choose to bounce something. You can draw a card. You can counter a spell. You can counter an ability.
Make a copy of your best thing.
Oh,
It's insane. The card does heaps.
It does everything.
I think for me, as considering I am in the blue camp of responding,
Sure.
instant speed is a big win in our targeted removal spells.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are some removal spells that come in the form of counter spells, and they are obviously instant speed. But saying the word in response, like saying that phrase, is one of my favorite things to do in Commander.
Yeah.
And it's usually because I'm about to remove something either from the stack or from the battlefield, and I'm doing it in response to what my opponent is doing, which gives them the least amount of time to react or rebuild or do anything.
Sure.
Responding later is always better.
Yeah.
Responding, we talked about this a lot in our in response episode.
We did.
But yeah, generally that whole episode's thesis statement was if you respond at the latest possible moment, it's generally going to be better because your opponents have a less chance to rebuild.
They do, and also you're going to have the greatest opportunity to view the full state of the board at the time when you use a removal spell. If you've got a sorcery speed, destroy target creature spell that you're using on your turn, you will have a certain number of options available to you, but if you have Path to Exile, which is exiles and is at instant speed, you can wait all the way around until it's almost your turn and then choose the most threatening thing. And I will tell you right now, 90% of the time, the thing you're going to remove later is going to be more threatening than whatever you had to remove earlier.
Yeah, hindsight is a bitch. And instant speed negates that horrific moment where you go, ooh, I wish I saved my removal spell.
Absolutely. And speaking of Path to Exile, in terms of mana value, obviously the less mana intensive it is, the better.
Yep.
1 to 2 mana value is really your sweet spot when it comes to removal, especially if they're instant speed. 3 is fine, especially if you're going to be able to remove multiple different sorts of things.
Yeah. Or if it has synergy with your deck.
Yes, definitely.
Same with the board wipes.
Yeah, absolutely. But when you start to get towards 4, unless you have like strong synergies with your deck and or the ability to answer multiple threats on the one spell, I would sort of be tending to avoid removal around that mana value.
For sure. I think that there's like a bunch of reasons we can kind of go into of like what is the best removal tick boxes to check off. I generally just think you really need to, when you're kind of looking at ones that go for your deck, I'm going to hark on about this all the time, is it has to be the best option for you and in your colors as well.
Definitely.
So yeah, there's a lot of things to consider here. It's kind of overwhelming. So in a bit we'll go through each color and we'll kind of give our favorites for sure.
Definitely we will. There's sort of 2 broad camps of removal, I would say, that you can sort these into as a consequence of those checkboxes we were just looking at, which is the really, really cheap, mana efficient, typically instant speed responses that are really efficient. They're just the best ones to leave up on and it's not your turn. And slightly more mana intensive spells that might be sorcery speed, but they're going to answer multiple things. It's good to have a mix of both. You definitely need to have instant speed responses. I completely agree with you, James. I think it's you'd so notice it when you play a deck that doesn't have them.
Yeah.
You feel like you just can't respond to what the game is doing.
I also think that it's worth saying here as well that when we talk about instant speed, removal or just removal in general, a lot of people think that, I'm removing a creature and they forget about other permanents. And we spoke,
Yes.
we actually said at the top of this section, but there are terrifying artifacts. There are terrifying enchantments.
Yeah.
There are terrifying planeswalkers. There are going to be terrifying battles soon.
Yeah.
So, like, we need to be able to deal with multiple types of permanent threats. Like,
Sure.
imagine the situation where you're going up against an artifact deck. Say you're going up against one of those Urtet decks, right? Makes a bunch of Mir.
Yep.
And then they play a Darksteel Forge. That is not a creature. Your Path to Exile is doing nothing.
Yeah.
But your Disenchant can hit that.
Yes, definitely it can. I think in general, it's good to have, multiple options. I think creatures, artifacts, enchantments are the most important. I agree, like, planeswalkers should be answered when you can.
You can answer those through combat, though,
You
as
can,
well.
that's the thing.
I'm not saying, like, you should make sure that you run a destroy target planeswalker spell, because that's probably a bad idea, because planeswalkers aren't that common in our format.
No.
They're, like, I think they're going to get a little bit more common throughout the years,
Probably.
but right now, it's like, how many games out of the 100 that you play do you actually see a really threatening planeswalker?
Yeah, I reckon it's like a third of the time you see it, and then usually it dies that turn to combat.
Exactly.
So you don't necessarily need that spell that says destroy target planeswalker.
But what I was trying to get across was making sure that not every single one of your removal spells just says destroy target creature.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking of permanent types as well, you talk about non-land permanents and permanents before. You should have at least one way to deal with a problematic land that your opponents have.
Yeah.
We're not talking mass land destruction. We are in the targeted removal section of the episode. But cards like Beast Within say destroy target permanent.
Yep.
That can blow up. Gaia's Cradle is legal in our format. Serra's Sanctum is legal in our format. These are some of the best lands that have ever been printed. You should have at least one way in your deck to deal with that land.
I mean, Cabal Coffer's Urborg. You got to get rid of that immediately when you see it. Even stuff like Hall of Heliod's Generosity.
Yeah.
That can repeat enchantments that are just going to hose you. Like, you just got rid of that Smothering Tithe. Well, they're getting it back with this land that you need to be able to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go straight into colors again. So what are you going to generally get with each color that you use? And remember that similar to the mass removal section, the colors that are better at doing removal are going to be the ones where if you're in multiple colors in your commander's color identity, which is most of the time, most of us play 2 to 3 color decks probably, you're going to lean towards the color that has the better removal in general.
100%. So should we just do Wooburg order and
let's
rate
do it.
them?
Definitely.
Well, I think at the top of the list, white is like the best one.
Exactly the same as mass removal again.
It is just the removal color. And like we spoke about it a lot in the philosophy episode about white and about why it's like that. But if you want to learn more about that, go listen to that episode. But yeah, this color is just really, really good. Generous Gift is a great example. Path and Swords are the two of the best examples of single target efficient instant speed removal ever to be printed for our format.
Definitely. And equally can do artifacts and enchantments. It does everything. White really can do everything. Probably next on the list, I would say it's probably going to be black, I reckon, just because black has the strongest creature removal after white, I would say.
Which is probably the most problematic permanent to deal with.
Yes. While we did say artifacts and enchantments, you should have a way to deal with them. Creatures are the most important, for sure. And black...
most likely your opponent's command is a creature.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Black can destroy exile, well, not so much exile, but can destroy creatures and planeswalkers really well. Also has a bunch of ways to force your opponents to sacrifice things, which we'll go into a bit later.
Does have a bit of an Achilles heel, though.
Yeah.
Artifacts and enchantments, there is one card
that does enchantments. Yeah, Feed the Swarm, which is really good for that reason if you're only in black or you don't have a color that can deal with those things. But yes, you're really limited when it comes to artifacts and enchantments, for sure. Sort of the opposite of this, I would say, but in a similar tier, is green. Green can deal with creatures not super well. Mostly it's fight spells, but green has great ways to deal with artifacts and enchantments. There's just millions of them. This is where you get the colors of creatures that ETB and destroy artifacts and enchantments. They're going to be amazing in Flicker decks, amazing in Graveyard Recursion decks. Really, really helpful to be able to have those, especially on creatures, which is really good. And you even get Beast Within, which they've admitted was a mistake.
That was definitely a color shifted whoopsie daisy. This card is now a staple in our format. But yeah, like green is pretty good. I think the next one... it's probably blue, in my opinion.
Interesting. The next two are pretty close,
It's pretty close, but I'm going to argue that blue does it slightly better, just because of the ability to counterspell, I think is, like, so good in blue. I think that if you can stop something being a threat before it even hits the board, that's more efficient than swords, right?
Definitely. Well, we talked about how we love the ability to answer multiple threats. The card counterspell will deal with any threat on the stack. You know, a planeswalker spell, a creature spell, an artifact, enchantment. All of those can be answered by a counterspell if it's on the stack.
Think about it. Like, we've talked about all these problematic permanents, but there are problematic instants and sorceries that you want to stop too,
Definitely,
right?
yeah.
And blue is going to be your best color to be able to remove that from the stack.
Definitely. I think the other thing that blue has gotten a lot better at recently, which has probably bumped it up in the rankings a bit, is it actually does have a few ways to deal with creatures. We'll probably outline them later. It's mostly recent cards, but even the ability to exile creatures. There's a new card that will exile artifacts, a couple of those as well, which we will go into. Can't typically deal with enchantments is the one thing that blue generally suffers with. It can bounce them, it can still counterspell them, but there's not really any like destroy target enchantment or like exile target enchantment in blue, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, but like I said, removing on the stack is just as good before it hits the board. But like you said, bouncing everything is where blue has that like little bit of a weak spot, because bouncing it to your opponent's hand is temporary removal, unless you can wheel it out of their hands the next turn.
Or, ironically, if you could counterspell it when it then comes down,
that's true.
That will work for you.
But that's a lot to set up.
Yes,
it's not as efficient of going, oh no, a Smothering Tithe.
Yes, which is sort of what white and green can do.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. And then sort of towards the bottom here, we would probably have red. Red can deal with creatures and planeswalkers, but it typically only does that through burn spells, so spells that deal damage to them.
Lightning Bolt, for instance.
Yes, but these are like slightly less efficient, especially in our format Commander, where creatures can get really, really big really, really quickly. It can do artifacts really well, which we'll outline a bit later.
Which is interesting, because as a color, it loves artifacts so much, but it can also blow them up really well.
Yes, definitely. Also can't deal with enchantments so well, with the exception of, this is sort of like similar to the Beast Within being the exception in green, Chaos Warp in red just deals with anything. It's a great spell.
However, there is a bit of it could go really bad.
It can. Be careful of who you're Chaos Warping, I would say.
If they're playing like a Joda deck, or if they're playing a Karuga deck, or something
like big and spooky.
Yeah, if they're playing high mana spells,
it's risky.
It could be bad.
It's risky for sure. All right, let's go straight into the colors and what our favorite spells are in those colors. So, going Wurundjeri order again. White. I think there's, again, similar to mass removal, we will outline just some generically good cards in each of the colors. In white, we mentioned it before, Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshares. They're the most efficient ways to deal with creatures in our format. Generous Gift, we said as well, deals with any permanent. That's amazing.
That's a huge one.
The other one I'd probably add in this camp, I think it's probably a little bit underplayed, maybe because it's been printed a little while ago. Heliod's Intervention. That card's amazing.
Yeah, I tell you who does play that a lot. Anyone that plays the Hanada. The Jeskai commander.
This is the commander where spells cost one less for each target that you have.
So like if you want to learn how to build a really interesting deck that's based on removal, Hanada is your commander.
Yes. So basically,
my God.
with Hanada on the battlefield, so Heliod's Intervention destroys X target artifacts and or enchantments, or you gain twice X life. If you're doing that first mode of destroying artifacts and enchantments, because it's X white, it costs one less for every target. If there's 10 artifacts and enchantments on the board, you pay white, and Hanada reduces the cost by 10 because you're targeting 10 different things.
It's insane.
It's really good.
It is a CEDH commander for this reason.
Yeah.
It is really interesting.
Definitely.
I think there is a couple of like favorites that I have, but there is a white aura that absolutely hoses me all the time, every time it hits me, and I consider it removal because it just stops the creature that it hits. So it's Darksteel Mutation.
Oh,
you heard of it?
This is the one that turns the creature into an indestructible 0/1 insect, I believe?
With no abilities.
Yes.
So it basically turns your commander, for example, into a 0/1 that is indestructible, which is the most annoying bit about it. A lot of people complain about Oko, for example, that like Elk's a commander.
Yeah.
This is more annoying to me because I can't chump block with this.
No, it's true. It's much harder to get rid of throughout the means of just destroying the enchantment. Yeah, no, it's a really, really good spell, especially for commanders. I would throw Disenchant as one of my favorite.
Solid.
It's just like on rate. It's a 2-mana spell that destroys an artifact or an enchantment. It's an instant. You're just very rarely going to go wrong with a spell like Disenchant.
For sure. I think Crush Contraband in the same vein is on rate still.
Sure.
Because it's actually 4 mana, but you can do 2 things.
Yes, you can exile an artifact and an enchantment if you want to.
And this is a perfect example of like the slightly cheaper, more efficient single target and the slightly slower, more expensive 2 targets.
Yeah, completely agree. In a similar vein, I love the some creatures that ETB and destroy stuff. This is going to be really good when you recur it, when you flicker it. Luminate Primordial, I think I've talked about recently. This is the one that Swords to Plowshares effectively one creature for each of your opponents.
So if you're in a flicker build, if you're running Conjurer's Closet in your deck, for example, this card is like running 20 Swords to Plowshares in your deck.
Yes, exactly. It's a 7-drop creature, so like you're paying a lot more than you would normally, but the ability to do it again and again and again, and have it on a creature as well that can attack and block and everything else.
Or if you're in like, I don't know, maybe like a Mardu Reanimator list or something
totally.
like that. Yeah, throw this in because you can cheat it out. Boom, 3 things gone.
Absolutely. I also love Angel of the Ruins for the same reasons. This is
I think the one with cycling.
It planes cycles weirdly to get a planes into your hand, but it's a 7 mana creature. It's like a 5/5 flyer or something. It ETBs and exiles up to 2 artifacts and enchantments.
Pretty good.
Really, really good. And again, when you're flickering it, when you're reanimating it, it's just going to get even better from there.
Also, Angel Tribal. Go for your life.
Yes, definitely do.
Do you want to move around the colour palette
to
blue?
Yeah, let's go into blue.
Well, look, you got your typical, like we've already said, all these amazing counterspells, like Counterspell. Even Arcane Denial is a really cheap, money-wise version of a good counterspell to run.
Definitely. Also only costs you the 1 blue pip, so great in decks that are playing more than just blue.
Correct. On the higher end of money expenditure, you've got like Mana Drain, which is just objectively better counterspell.
Yes, it is.
This one gives you mana in the first main phase of your next turn, equal to the spell you countered.
Yep, so if you counter a 6-drop, you get 6 colorless in your next turn. It's amazing.
You can tag it as half a ramp spell in your deck if you wanted to.
You could.
I think there's like other really incredible counterspells, like Offer You Can't Refuse is like one of the most efficient counterspells to be printed recently.
Yeah, this is a 1 mana counterspell. Counters only a non-creature spell.
Correct, yeah.
And then its controller makes 2 treasures, but so definitely gets stronger the higher power level you go.
For sure, and I think it's like it's testament that it's played in CDH, and that's like the first counterspell to be added to the list of counterspells in CDH since Fierce Guardianship.
Yeah,
so,
in
like,
quite a while.
It's pretty good. But in terms of like targeted removal off the stack and on the board, like Rapid Hybridization, Pongify, those single target 1 mana instant speed destroy target creature, they make a 3/3.
Yep.
Seems fucking brilliant to me.
Yeah, I don't know how blue got that end of the deal, but lucky blue, I guess. I also like, in the slightly more expensive mana value wise, 2 mana slot, Reality Shift.
Yeah,
exile something and then they manifest the top card of their library. So if it's a creature, they can flip it for its mana cost. Otherwise, it just sits there as a 2/2 forever. And probably my favorite blue removal spell at the moment, Resculpt. This is the one that, for 1 and a blue, exiles an artifact or a creature, and they make a 4/4 as part of the exchange. But the ability to exile creatures or artifacts in blue is just basically unprecedented.
At instant speed, too. Yeah. Like, that's like so good.
It's perfect. I've never felt bad casting a Resculpt.
No, alright, well, some of my favourites in blue. Come on, James, you got a lot. Suspend. Suspend is a really interesting one. So this is another one that is 1 blue, an instant speed, gets rid of a creature, and it actually says exile target creature with 2 time counters on it.
Yes.
So this means that once its last time counter is removed after every upkeep, you remove a time counter, the owner of that card can cast it without paying its mana cost. It's like giving it Suspend.
Yeah. With 2 time counters. So yeah, it's basically prolongs whatever that was going to happen for 2 turns.
Temporary removal, but it is 1 blue mana at instant speed. So like if you're in a deck that wants to run Rapid Hybridization or Pongify, Suspend is also a really good option.
Yeah.
There's also a really interesting kind of side effect that happens when you hit someone's commander with this.
Where if they decide either to chuck 2 time counters on it or they're like, oh Lord, I'd rather recast it. Yeah.
Also, if you are in blue, you can be very, very clever and make sure you have a counterspell ready for when it comes back onto the stack.
You're horrible.
So if you hit someone's commander and you know that you've got a counter in hand, you're playing big brain.
Big brain evil, I would say.
100%.
In terms of exiling, God, blue is really good at this, which is kind of crazy to say out loud.
Yeah.
Anthem Mutineer is also on a body.
That's on a stick, that's wild.
This is the 4 mana one that exiles a creature and its controller makes a salamander, which I think is a 4/3.
Which is my favourite creature type to name whenever a card says name a creature type.
This one also has Encore, so once it's in your graveyard, you can pay, I think, 6 and you'll get 3 copies of it.
Which is still, like, really good. It's like casting
exile
3
3 things.
resculpts.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Totally.
I also really like in specific circumstances, Fuel for the Cause.
What does this do?
So this is one that I've recently seen more people playing recently, purely because Phyrexians are back around. So Fuel for the Cause is a counterspell. It's 4 mana, but it counters any spell, and then you proliferate. So if you're playing Infect, this is a really good counterspell for you to run because it synergizes with your deck, but it's really high costed. So this is like, you have to be playing a deck that really wants to proliferate.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like a commander's counters that you're wanting to proliferate or something like that. But I used to run it in Atraxa before I kind of left that deck in the deck box forever to die. But I've seen it a lot more recently. People are rediscovering this card because Infect's back.
I think if you specifically want to proliferate, this kind of reminds me of the 5 mana counterspell that has Cascade. So it's like if you desperately want to Cascade anyway, then like countering a spell is just like a bonus, right?
Yeah.
So yes, if you really want to proliferate,
Forceful Denial, I think that
yes,
card
it is Forceful Denial. Yeah, definitely. I also really like Imprisoned in the Moon.
Very similar to freaking Darksteel Mutation.
Yes,
this card.
very difficult to deal with. So this is a aura that I think can enchant a creature. I'm probably gonna get one of these wrong. I think it's creature, land, or enchantment, I believe, or maybe Planeswalker is in there. It turns it into a colorless land a land that taps for colorless.
Yes.
Very difficult to deal with. Also deals with lands specifically, so a great way to deal with those really problematic lands in the format. And basically, it will hit whatever you want it to hit at the time. Great, obviously, if you're an enchantress, where you're going to get some sort of card draw trigger or ramp trigger from casting the enchantment. It's going to be even better.
Hot tip: if you ever get hit with an Imprisoned in the Moon, if you play a bounce land, you can bounce it to hand. Your bounce land becomes a removal spell in itself.
We broke the bounce lands again.
It's so easy to break.
Let's move around the color pie again to black.
Yes.
Black has fantastic removal, as we said.
God, it's like the card Murder should give you some indication of Black's ideologies on removing stuff.
Definitely. So specifically creatures, you're never going to run out of good spells in Black to deal with creatures. Deadly Rollick is probably the best one in the moment. This is the one part of that free cycle of spells from Commander 2020. It's a 4 mana instant, but you can cast it for free if you control your commander. Exile's a creature.
Yeah, Exile too. It's just really efficient. It's also
really
not the worst rate in Black for 4 mana. If you don't control your commander, 4 mana is fine.
Murder is kind of the rate, which is 3 mana destroy target creature.
That's 100%.
4 mana exile is actually totally fine. I mean, we're not saying play Murder, but in terms of the history of that effect being printed, 3 is the average. So 4 mana exile in Black is pretty good.
It's totally fine. And we've already mentioned a couple of other spells before, but Feed the Swarm is a must run, especially if you're in mono black, because it's the only one that hits enchantments in Black.
Also, if you're in black red, basically if you're not in white or green, which are going to give you access to way better enchantment removal. Yes.
Yeah, if you've chosen your commander and you're in black-red, you only actually have to choose 97 cards because you have to include Chaos Warband and Feed the Swarm.
Pretty much. In terms of just generically dealing with creatures, Infernal Grasp is probably the most efficient version of this effect at the moment. 2 mana, destroys a creature, you lose 2 life. Who cares?
Yeah, go for the Throat and other cards in that range as well.
Similar, yeah.
Yeah, they're all just totally serviceable.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've been really loving, this is again in that sort of separate camp we were talking about, dealing with multiple threats. Soul Shatter is incredible.
You run this in so many of your black
decks.
I
bought 4 copies and put one in every black deck that I run, and I'm not taking them out. It's so good. So
it's really good because it always makes the opponent sack the highest mana value creature they have, right?
Yes, or Planeswalker. So usually, now correct me if I'm wrong, but a 1-drop 1/1 elf that taps for green, let's call it Llanowar Elves, is not as good as I don't know, that 50/50 Bane of Progress that I cast earlier. Yeah.
It's generally the higher mana value permanent on your board is going to be the scarier one.
Yeah, it definitely always deals with one of the best permanents on your opponent's boards, and it does one for each of your opponents. Basically, it's a 3 mana spell. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or a planeswalker with the highest mana value. So if you have a 6-drop, you got to sack it. And as you say, most of the time, the problematic thing is going to be the 6 or 7 drop.
100%. Big shout out to Hagra Mauling.
Yes.
It's a land on the back.
Yep.
It take out a basic swamp, now you've got an extra removal spell.
Yep. It's overcosted, but who cares? It's a land.
Well, It could actually cost 3 mana,
It can.
which is the rate for murder.
It has happened before when someone has to have no basic lands. It can happen.
If you're playing against the guy that's playing the 5-color deck and has $6,000 to spend on dual
Yes.
lands, yeah, it can happen.
It can happen. I've definitely seen it before. Some of my favorites, again, gosh, I'm just realizing my favorite things are just ETBs.
Yeah, you play Flicker and Creature Tribal, man. Of course it is.
Definitely. Ravenous Chupacabra and Noxious Gearhulk. Both of these just destroy creatures. Noxious Gearhulk has slightly higher upside of gaining you some life, but yeah, they're ETBs, so you can recur them with your graveyard, with your Flicker, whatever you feel like. In a similar vein, Plaguecrafter, Fleshbag Marauder, Merciless Executioner. I think there's one more that I always forget. All of these are 3-mana creatures that say each player sacrifices a creature. So if you can recur them again and again, like in a Marin deck, a Rami deck, you're just making your opponent sack stuff. And eventually they're going to start running out of things that they would like to sacrifice.
Yeah, it's hyper efficient. But definitely. If you do want some instant and sorcery options, my vote, Tragic Slip. If you're in black, Tragic Slip is very good, especially if you are in like an aristocrat strategy.
Definitely.
This gives -1/-1, unless a creature died this turn, which means it gives -13/-13, which kills pretty much anything.
Yes. Importantly, this is another one of those ones that gets around indestructible. Giving something, like we were saying earlier with the mass removal, giving something -X gets around indestructible.
Yeah, another one that gets around indestructible, which I play in my zombie tribal deck, is Dark Salvation.
Oh, what does this do?
This is a really interesting spell that I think is super slept on because it also gives you a huge board state.
Sure.
It's black X and X, I think, so you have to pay like double X cost.
Sure.
But target player, usually you, makes X 2/2 black zombies.
Okay, so if you pay 2 into X, so you're paying 5 altogether, you're making 2 2/2s.
2 2/2s.
Okay, that's fine.
And then a target creature gets -X/-X for however many zombies that player controls.
Whoa.
So in my zombie tribal deck, usually I already have like a big board of zombies.
Yeah.
So in some situations, this is actually a 1-drop removal spell.
That's kind of fun.
So
because you can just not pay into the X.
If I just pay X = 0, I make 0 zombies, but then your Sun Titan gets -8/-8 because I have 8 zombies.
Oh, that's fun. I think, if you're in specifically zombie tribal, this becomes amazing. But yeah, wow.
But also if you're in token synergies or anything like that, this thing gives you a board state and kills the best thing on the board.
Totally. Next one, Red. Red, as we said, pretty good. The generically good ones here are Abrade is a really, really good one.
Sure.
This is a 2-mana instant that either deals 3 damage to a creature or to any target, or destroys an artifact. So this is doing that modality thing that we really, really like.
Yeah.
Bolt, dealing 3 damage to something kills most things, usually, in the format.
Didn't we do a Scryfall search for an episode not long ago about how many commanders die to a bolt or something like that?
I was looking at how many commanders would be able to kill my Tygam when it would attack.
That's it.
So had more than 4 or more power, and I think there were more commanders that had less than 4 power than commanders that had 4 or more power.
And because we know that generally toughness is the same value and like in terms of connection.
That's true.
I'd be interested. Let's do a Scryfall search. We could chuck this on the Discord and find out how many commanders die to a lightning bolt.
Speaking of, lightning bolt is perfectly serviceable.
100%.
Definitely.
Yep. One of my favorites in the category of removal, but it's like synergizing with certain deck strategies, is Fling. And you can also run Kazul's Fury.
Right, which costs 1 more, but is a land on the back.
Exactly. Take out a basic mountain, there you go. You got another removal spell. But this one has you sacrifice a creature, and it deals X damage to any target, where X is the creature's power that you sacrifice.
Yes, in any deck that's going to make big creatures, this just becomes incredible. I know you love this in your Phylath deck, which makes plants really, really big. Yeah.
I also really like it because, again, it's the thing I spoke about before. It's instant speed. So if someone's going to remove your big threat, in response to that, you remove your own threat by sacrificing it and kill one of their best things.
This is basically what we would call a 2-for-1, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. I love, in terms of just the pure efficiency of it, Shattering Spree.
Yes, God, this is an Is It card. Like, actually from guilds.
Oh, yeah, it actually has, like, the little watermark behind it as well. So, for a red, it destroys target artifact. It's instant speed, I believe.
It's sorcery,
speed.
yeah.
But it has Replicate. So, you can pay red any number of times, and you copy the spell for each time you've paid that cost. This is really, really good, especially when you get to higher power levels where you're afraid of getting counterspelled. Basically, it puts all those copies on the stack. Someone can counterspell the original Shattering Spree. You still get all the other copies that you're targeting stuff with.
Yeah, the other really cool thing it does is it triggers Magecraft.
Oh, yeah.
Which is super good. From Strixhaven, that mechanic was very strong.
I think it went up in price quite a lot around the time that Strixhaven came out, and I'm not surprised.
Big shocker.
Yeah,
Big shocker.
Having your Archmage Emeritus, Magecraft, draw a card, and then casting Shattering Spree for 5, being like, destroy 5 artifacts, draw 5 cards.
Far out, that's a good rate.
Definitely.
I actually run a lot of red decks, so I have a couple of more to shout out.
Sure.
Shatter Skull Smashing is...
Oh, this is the mythic land on the back. Right?
Yeah, so you can bolt it in. So basically you can pay 3 life and it enters untapped.
Sure, unlike the other ones which usually are tapped, yeah.
Yeah, but this is an X damage spell, so it's a bit of a burn spell, but you can deal X damage divided amongst 2 creatures, so it hits multiple threats, which is nice.
Yeah, great.
The second you get over 6 in your X value, it deals twice that much. So
wow.
If you're in a Damage Matters deck, this deck, like if you're in the like a Tarolf deck, for example, this is freaking insane.
Definitely.
There is also another one from Kaldheim that's it's a giant, and whatever excess damage.
Agar, I think it's called.
That's the one. Yeah. That would be sick in that deck.
Definitely. Would also be good in like a Torbrand deck that's just anything that cares about burn, it becomes better. But I think it's like there's a reason these mythic lands are all so expensive, and it's because they're all totally just great.
Yeah.
Perfectly
100%.
serviceable removal spells that are lands and can enter untapped. It's crazy.
And it's really easy to put in your deck because you just take out a basic.
Yeah, this one you can 100% always take out a basic.
Because it actually can come in untapped. Yeah, it's
definitely.
Insane. One more before we move on.
Sure.
In red, I think You Find Some Prisoners is wildly underplayed.
What is this one? This is from the D&D set, the
Yes.
Adventures in the Forgotten Realms.
Yeah, so it's a modal spell, again, which is ticking lots of boxes. One of the modes is destroy target artifact.
Okay.
So there's your removal spell. But the other one is exile the top 3 cards. It's basically like Reckless Impulse.
Oh.
So you can either Reckless Impulse or do the destroy target artifact.
Oh, this
so
is the 2-mana instant, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think you can play it until the end of your next turn as well. I might have to check that. But
I think this is the one that can hit your opponent's libraries as well. I'm pretty sure it's
it?
I'm pretty sure you can hit your opponent's library and then steal some of their spells instead.
I don't run it at the moment because I had slept on it, but I played it against it in a game the other day, and it was just like the digging was so good. I think they were playing a Prosper Tomebound deck. So
so casting things from exile is already giving them some upside there already. Yeah, that definitely makes it a lot better.
Let me have a look here on Scryfall.
Yeah, sure.
It exiles the top 3 cards of target opponent's library. It's just from target opponent, so you can play them until the end of your next turn. And you can spend mana as though it was any mana of any color, which is kind of insane as well.
Wow, so just Nick stuff.
Yeah,
it's sweet.
Criminally underplayed, I think.
No,
I think
definitely.
It's a really good card.
I mean, 2-mana destroy an artifact is perfectly serviceable.
Yeah, a Braid
already.
does the same thing.
Yeah,
it's the same rate.
Definitely. Moving straight on to green. As we said, green gets to do everything.
The favorite child.
the favorite child. As we said, artifacts and enchantments it can do in spades. Reclamation Sage we already mentioned. That's a creature that ETBs. Nature's Claim is the most efficient just version of this effect in terms of an instance. This is a 1-mana instant. Destroys an artifact or enchantment. You gain 4 life.
The person that owned it gains 4 life.
Yes. So you can destroy your own crypt if you wanted to gain 4 life. I've heard this is relevant in CDH.
Wow, that's weirdly good.
Yes, but most of the time you're destroying someone else's thing. And you're like, whatever, you can gain 4 life.
In Commander, who cares?
I got rid of your thing for a single green pip. It's amazing.
At instant speed as well.
Yep. Druid of Purification is probably the most efficient version of this effect. This is the one that ETBs and players vote on artifacts or enchantments that your opponents control. So if I cast it, that you're in a game with me, I cast Druid of Purification. I think it's a 4-drop creature. Each of my opponents, including you, vote for an artifact or enchantment that I don't control, and then it destroys the artifact or enchantment with the most votes, or if the vote is tied, it destroys all of them.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh my lord, that's a really, really sick effect, especially in Commander where votes can tie.
Yeah.
You can politically, strategically plan with your opponents to make sure the vote ties to get the best effect.
This one is a little bit expensive. I think people have realised how good it is.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yes, super efficient version of that effect.
We did talk about how green fights a lot. So a couple of my highlights would be boxing ring.
This is in your bear tribal deck.
I like the idea of a bear wearing boxing gloves. It's kind of funny.
Everyone can appreciate that.
Yeah, it ETBs. I think it also makes a treasure if something has forward, but then you can tap it to make something fight.
So it's recurable, basically.
Yeah, it is recurable. Kalni Heart Ambush, or I think it's Kalni Ambush.
Yes.
Yeah, the one that's a land on the back as well.
Yeah, it's a fight spell and it's a land. I think it's like a 3 mana instant. Yeah.
Yeah, so again, slightly above your usual rate, which is like 2 mana.
Yep.
But Primal Might is an X version of this effect where you can buff the creature before it fights.
This one is sorcery speed, but the upside of being able to just murk somebody is just too good to pass up.
It also means that like if you do it in your first main phase, kill the blocker that they have, and then go to combat, it's still got that buff on it. Which in my Gishath deck is
it's also got a dinosaur in the
It's Galta's spirit.
It totally
it's a big old Galta.
Beautiful. In terms of some more creatures that deal with stuff, I love Haywire Might, Caustic Caterpillar. These sorts of effects are great in an aristocracy sort of deck where you can sack them, bring them back. They will destroy an artifact or enchantment when they're sacrificed. Both of those, which are really, really good.
Yeah, Haywire Might's incredibly good.
Yeah, definitely.
So efficient.
I'm going to go out on a limb here. Maybe a slightly controversial opinion. I think people should play Krosan Grip a lot less than they currently are. This is the 3 mana instant that destroys an artifact or enchantment.
But it has split second.
Has split second, so you can't activate abilities or cast spells unless the ability you're activating is a mana ability while it's on the stack. So basically, it means you can't respond.
That's like, so you're saying less? People should play it less.
I think people should play it less. To be honest, here's my thinking. Right, at low power levels, people are very rarely going to respond to your spells anyway. You don't see counter spells all that often. And you don't see people like doing sort of trickery at instant speed in response to removal spells very often. In general, people aren't doing it. And at higher power levels, so if you're talking CDH or high powered, people play Nature's Claim because it's the most efficient version of the effect. You're generally not going to want to pay 3 mana to remove 1 threat at those higher power levels because it's all about mana efficiency. So to me, this is one of those cards that's in that weird zone where it's like, yes, the upside is super high, but when you like put it into the specific scenarios, I don't see that many scenarios where it's that good, personally.
I disagree.
Disagree?
Yeah. Split second is so... I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying about the low power levels and high power levels. It kind of does nothing. Like, it's a bit of a nothing spell in both those camps. But we usually play in the middle of those two levels.
That's true.
And I think that a lot of the time, and like for I'm gonna say this card is relevant because I still play it. It's in my mono green list. But also I was in a game like months ago at this point, I think, and someone had Time Sieve. They didn't have a combo on the field yet, but they were about to like indeterminately loop a lot of turns.
Sure, so this is the one that sacks 5 artifacts, you take an extra turn after this.
Correct. And they cast a spell before activating Time Sieve. So in response to the spell, a split second Krosan gripped their Time Sieve, which means they couldn't put an extra turn on the stack before the thing died.
That is pretty sweet.
I get what you're saying, but I think we play more in the middle of low-powered and high-powered a lot of the time.
Sure.
I think that's where a lot of us like to build our commander decks. We like to play with power, but we also want to have fun and have a non-CDH game at the best of times. So, like, I am going to disagree with you on this one.
That's fair. I respect it. I think for me, it's like... Yeah, I think it's those stories are super memorable, and I appreciate that about good commander cards is when they produce great stories. I've had Krosan Grip cast in response to me try and do something with Aether Flux Reservoir.
Yep, that'll do it.
And then I couldn't pay 50 life because I can't put any abilities on the stack.
So yeah, you could cast a spell and then someone in response to it blows up your Aether Flux Reservoir.
Can't pay the 50 life.
Activate it, yeah.
Those stories stand out in our minds. I think the thing I would say about a spell like this is the things that don't stick out in our minds are the time where it's okay. Like, we remember the times
True.
that are really memorable. We don't remember
Yeah.
much of the times when it was like, oh, that spell was fine.
Yeah,
You know what I
I've
mean?
never been out to dinner and come back and then like a year later someone was like, oh, let's go to this restaurant. I go, oh, I had the best night there. It was all right. I had the most okay chicken I've ever eaten in my entire life.
It's just not something that stands out in our minds.
The
right?
dessert was adequate.
I love me some okay. Yeah, beautiful. As we said before with the board wipes, when we start moving into multicolored spells, we're going to get the best of both worlds. So we're going to
sure.
get the upside from multiple different camps. So Binding the Old Gods. This is a 4-mana saga.
This is bonkers.
In Golgari. The first mode, I believe, is destroy target permanent.
I think it's non-land
permanent.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
And then the second mode is search for a forest card, put it on the battlefield.
Forest as well. You can get your triome with this.
Yeah,
if
you can get your
to.
triome. You can get your gingerbread cabin if you're a connoisseur of fine sweets.
If you really like those okay desserts.
Beautiful. I think the last one is creatures get death touch on the turn to turn. That one's less relevant, but it's still good.
Oh no, it is relevant.
Yeah?
I run Binding of the Old Guns in my elf deck, in my Golgari
Oh.
elves. And dude, death touch on all of your elves means no one is blocking them. Which means all 15 elves are getting through, which means 15 damage.
That's pretty sweet.
It is very good.
Golgari gets kind of some really good removal spells. Assassin's Trophy is played like pretty ubiquitously in CDH.
If you're in black and green, run Assassin's Trophy.
It's a 2-mana instant, destroys target permanent. Its controller searches for a basic land, I believe, puts it on the battlefield.
When you think about it, it is an incredible path to exile that is black and green.
Yeah,
Like,
2 mana.
so
It's
good,
just
yeah.
crazy efficient. For sure.
There's a bunch of other ones. One that came up recently in a game we were playing was Rakdos Charm.
Oh,
This card is insane. We might save the story until when we go to the end. But this card either exiles a target card from a graveyard.
No, a full graveyard.
Sorry, exiles a full graveyard. You're so right. Or has the mode of dealing 1 damage to each creature an opponent controls deals 1 damage to its owner.
It's actually everyone's creatures deal 1 damage to their controllers. Yeah. So
Ugh.
against a token deck, it does that. But it also destroys an artifact.
True,
It's the third
yes,
mode.
yes.
All of the modes on Rakdos Charm
Yeah.
are super, super relevant. But yeah, it basically gets you the, graveyardy
So it has
stuff.
2 removal modes, because I had it in my head that it removes the graveyard, which is, again, something important to think about when you're running removal.
You should have at least one way to do that.
Yeah, we spoke about it when we were talking about, all the cards before, but, 2 modes of removal and a kind of
Win
con stapled to it.
Well,
for
yeah,
2 mana.
we won't spoil the story, but someone killed us with that other mode
Yes.
recently, and it was beautiful. When you get into white-green, you have a card like Sundering Growth. So this is disenchant, straight up, destroy target artifact or enchantment. It's in hybrid white-green. So you can pay it white-white, you can pay green-green, whatever you feel like. Also then populates. So you can make a token copy of a token that you control for 2 mana. So this is literally just strictly better than Disenchant if you're in a white-green token deck.
Yeah, did you make an 8/8 with that Godsire? Have another one.
Oh, that's some beautiful upside.
There are so many, but I want to shout out my favorite in single target removal because it is so expensive and people think it's stupid, but I love the spell Casualties of War. Another Golgari spell, but this basically hits every permanent type. It doesn't hit battle because that didn't exist when this was printed, but it destroys a target creature, planeswalker, enchantment, artifact, and land.
Yeah.
It hits everything you need, and it also, because it's multi-layered, you don't have to have every single target selected for the spell to resolve. You can cast it, and if no one has a planeswalker, you can still target everything else.
Yes.
But I have used this card so many times and stopped all 3 of my opponents from winning, and then on my next turn, won the game.
I've also seen you copy it before, and that becomes extra.
It's a board wipe.
Yeah, basically a board wipe at that point. I love in red-white, you get access to a card like Wear and Tear, or, Wear/Tear. This is one of those, sort of double cards, not a flip card, but on the front face, it's kind of got 2 cards on it. This is one of those ones you can actually cast one or both. I forget what they're called, maybe Meld or something. Basically, one of them is
Fuse, I think.
Fuse, yeah. I think it's for 1 and a white, it destroys an enchantment, and for a red, it destroys an artifact. And you can just pay 3 and destroy an artifact and an enchantment.
Super good.
Super modal, super effective at dealing with multiple threats.
Yeah, I like Drown in the Lock as well as a multicolored removal spell.
Sure, this blue-black.
Yeah, and you have to be in a synergy that's putting cards in graveyards, whether it's your own or opponents, because it can either counter a spell with cards equal... So, mainly opponents' graveyards. you want to be milling, because it will counter a spell equal to or less than the number of cards in that player's graveyard, or it can destroy a target creature.
Yeah.
In blue-black.
Super, super good. Probably the best removal in general is going to come in black and white. Because they're sort of probably the two best removal colors. You combine them together, you get cards like Anguished Unmaking.
Yeah.
This is a 1 black white for an instant. Exile target non-land permanent. You lose 3 life. The 3 life is irrelevant. You get to deal with absolutely anything you feel like.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And I know that you love... in terms of, we're doing it in the targeted removal section.
I bit my tongue when we were talking about board wipes earlier. I know exactly what you're going to talk about.
Yep.
Damn, it's good. Okay, I'm going to call it a single target removal spell because black, it destroys target creature. Opponent controls. Yep. But you can overload it for Wrath of God mana.
Yes, so 2 white.
And it becomes Wrath of God.
Yep.
It basically just destroys every creature you don't control.
Super sick having the modes available to you.
This ticks both, like when you're building your Moxfield list and you're tagging things, this is both single target and a board wipe.
Yeah.
It's just super good.
It's beautiful. Colorless removal, we're not going to go into so much. There's not very many colorless commanders specifically.
No.
There's very few colorless removal spells, in terms of targeted removal, that are better than the colored ones, I would say. There's a couple of exceptions for sure, usually in like artifact synergies, I would say.
Well, like I just recently built my Tornos list, which is copying abilities of artifacts.
So anything that's tapping now to destroy something or exile something becomes so much better in a Tornos deck because you can copy that ability and do it twice.
Exactly. So the one I run in my deck, because it's got a charge counter theme, is Lux Cannon. So you basically have to charge this one up, but you put charge counters on it over time, but then you can tap and remove 3 charge counters and it destroys target permanent. However, if you copy that ability with Tornos, it gets really good. There's also like Meteor Golem, which is like a 7 mana 3/3 that when it ETBs, you destroy target permanent.
Yep.
Not bad.
Not bad.
Spine of Ishsar just got reprinted in the
Brothers War
precon.
Yep.
And it's good, especially in decks that can reanimate artifacts from the graveyard or make copies like Mishra.
Oh, this one's interesting as well because I think Spine of Ishsar also triggers when it leaves the battlefield. So you can also, if you can bounce it to your hand and then recast
sacrifice it.
Sacrifice it, yeah. So that's a 7 mana, I think, artifact. But if the synergy's there, you can totally play them.
100%. There's also Transmogrifying Wand, which is one of my favorites. It turns things, it basically destroys something and the owner creates a 2/4 ox, I think.
Oh yeah. It's just a random token.
I think it's an ox. I can't remember if it's an ox or a goat.
I think it's an ox.
It's bizarre, but again, it's a colorless activated ability from an artifact. So when I run it in Tornos, it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's copyable for sure. That's just some of our favorite removal spells. You can totally find a bunch more of them by looking at our deck lists. My Moxfield profile and James's Moxfield profile are in the show notes, and both of our lists are all of our lists are tagged. So you can just go to that targeted removal tag, that board wipe tag, and you'll be able to find anything you want.
100%. Wow, have we been talking about this for like an hour and 40 minutes?
Yeah.
We have gone through a lot.
We have. We have. So, removing threats is essential to any good Commander game. There's lots of great removal out there, but it pays to be familiar with the options in each color identity. Having a few wraths available to you and plenty of targeted removal will make your games feel interactive, interesting, and closely contested. So, Space Commanders, command received.
Thank you for doing the salute. I appreciate it.
It's ubiquitous now. I've got to do it.
I'm glad, because when we start doing, I don't know, maybe a video podcast in the future, people will see it.
Oh.
Who knows? Maybe.
A beautiful goal for someday. Well, to the listeners, do you feel commanded? What are your favorite removal spells? And did we miss any that you think you absolutely must play in every day?
I doubt it. We've been speaking for nearly 2 hours. I'm sorry for a long episode, everybody. We hope you enjoyed it.
Yes. I mean, surely you at least have a bunch of options now.
Yeah. I really don't want to get any messages now being like, James, I'm in blue-black. What should I be running for my removal?
We'll just send you this episode now. Sorry to your 2 hours that will then be spent here. The best way to get in touch with us, you can send us an email. Our email is in the show notes. You can @ us on Twitter, also in the show notes, or join our Discord and chat with us and other members of our playgroup. Would also help us a bunch if you could leave us a review on whichever platform you listen to this podcast on. Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can't do it on Google Podcasts for some reason.
And we will keep repeating that every episode until Google Podcasts makes a review button.
We are on a crusade. And of course, don't forget to check out our Patreon page, which is linked in the show notes for more ways to support us directly. It's the absolute best way to support our content
100%.
and let us improve the different things that we do. We'd like to thank, especially in the Space Commander tier, Fletcher Cutting. Thank you so much. We love you.
Yes, and we can now tell the story.
Oh, sure.
Because part of the incredible the top tier, which is the Space Commander tier on our Patreon page, is you get to play once a month with Walt and I. And that's no matter where you are. If you're remote from Melbourne, if you're in a different country, doesn't matter. We'll play Spell Table with you. If you can set yourself up, we're pretty well equipped for Spell Table. So we'd love to play with you. But we played our first game of our Patreon games.
Yes.
With Fletcher the other day. Oh my god.
It was a ripper.
What a game.
It was over 3 hours long.
It was ridiculously long.
For context, we got to the game store that we were playing at that night, which was Plenty of Games, at 6 p.m, I believe, roughly.
Yeah.
That store closes at 10. We finished this game at like 9:20, and we were like, I think that's it.
I can't play another game. I bought 5 decks that night. I didn't play any of them
I
else.
played a single one of them. But it was an absolute long haul. Also featured our friend Cooper / Stubbs.
Yeah.
Who some of you may remember from the Burnout episode a few episodes ago. So we can confirm he is back at Magic, and we even managed to coax him down to a Commander game.
At a game store too, which is like a big step for for sure.
It was really, really, really fun.
But look, big shout out to Fletcher, who did end up winning that game.
He did.
The commander that Fletcher was playing was Amber Gristle O'Maul, which is one of the ones from Baldur's Gate, which you can give a background to.
Sure.
And the background that he chose was Agent of the Shadow Thieves.
So these are the 2 commanders effectively for the deck.
Yeah, basically the point of the deck was attacking with the commander and getting a bunch of unblockable creatures attacking different opponents.
Yes.
So he could discard his hand and draw 3 cards every single turn.
Yep, and then the win cons were sort of like Glenhorn Buccaneer style, when you discard, you get to do
Shabraz, that kind of
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, there were a few discard outlets specifically.
Really, really cool deck. I have to give it to Fletch. That was a really interesting build that I've never seen anyone play before.
No, neither have I. Played great as well. Like, it was really synergistic. It never looked out of the game.
No, but the thing that I absolutely loved about this game was every single person had a chance at winning.
Yes.
I was playing my Dinosaurs deck. You were playing your
Queen Marchesa deck.
Yep. Stubbo was playing his Prava and Kamal builds, partner commanders, which arguably was probably the strongest deck at the table.
There was some really strong cards in the deck, like Anon in Procession, Doubling Season.
Craterhoof Behemoth.
Yeah, it just had like the best cards in that sort of deck.
100%, but I'm not sure if our listeners have ever heard of Stormherd, because it's probably a bit of an outdated card that Stubbsy is still running, because it's like...
It's a 10 mana sorcery.
Yeah, it's so overrated.
You make X 1/1 Pegasus tokens with flying, I believe, where X is your life total.
But Stubbsy's life total was 11. So it wasn't great.
No, it wasn't the usual make 30 things.
However, Fletcher did the single cleverest, most dubious political deal I've ever seen. Basically, the deal was, Stubbsy, on your turn, if you kill Walton James, I will not kill you on my turn. They were the terms. And so Cooper was just like, all right, done. Because then I have lethal on you next turn, so you're going to either have to find a board wipe with next to no cards in hand. Like, sure. Walt and I die in a blaze of glory. We went down fighting. We nearly both won a couple of times.
Yes, it was very close. I think I literally was digging cards. I dug down to 1 life with Erebos Bleak-Hearted. Like, it was that kind of a game. Like, desperately looking for an answer.
It was nail-biting. We had a bit of an audience watching by the end of it, to be honest. Then, in Stubby's end step, Fletcher cast Rakdos Charm.
Yes.
So... we spoke about this card in this episode, that one of the modes is each creature an opponent controls deals 1 damage to its controller. Cooper Stubbsy had literally just cast a spell that said, make 1/1s equal to your life total.
I think it was something like, I think he had like 15 creatures and he was on like 14 life as well. Like, it was right down to the wire. I should say, like, I think often when we talk about Commander games and we hear like 3 hours long, a lot of people go, oh, I don't want to play like that. This was one of those nail biters where like everyone was in it from the beginning till the end. There were like 4 board wipes, but they were all at the right time.
Yeah.
People were on the verge of winning.
I had to get up and get 4 snacks. Like.
I think everyone got snacks except for maybe me.
Yeah. You were just too focused.
I was in the zone, man.
But look, it was a super fun game to play, and I'm so looking forward to playing more games with Fletcher. So
yeah,
thank
and
you
with
so
our
much again.
other Space Commanders someday. Yeah. Yep, definitely. We'd also like to just very briefly thank Palms Off Gaming, who sponsor this podcast. They make some really outstanding deck boxes, sleeves, binders, other gaming accessories. They are actually sold at the game store that we often play at on Monday nights,
100%.
which is Plenty of Games in Melbourne. They have some really outstanding products, some great binders, everything like that. You can check them out at palmsoffgaming.com.au.
All right, well, this has been a pretty long one.
Sure.
So let's have a planeswalk to... I want to go somewhere. It's your week, but let's go somewhere that's gonna make us feel a little bit relaxed after this mammoth episode.
Sure. I would like to planeswalk once again to a galaxy far away.
Oh my god. This is like 80% of our planeswalks.
It's not
now.
Andor. Don't worry. It's not Andor.
Which I have finished now, and oh my god, it is incredible.
I
it
knew you'd
is so
love it.
good.
I knew you'd love it. No, I'd like to planeswalk to a Star Wars video game. There's a sequel coming out in the next few months. It's Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order.
With Cal
Kestis. Yeah.
Kestis, that's it, yeah. Oh my god, he's cool.
He's so cool. So I have had this game in my Steam library. I'm one of those people who has like 100 games in his Steam library. He's only played about 5 of them. I finally got around to playing it. I've got my partner like watching over my shoulder while I've been playing Electra. She's been loving it as well. It's just like... It's exactly what I want in a game. There's so much like open world exploration.
Also, the lore is so good. The
lore is really cool.
Saul Guerrero appears in it.
Yeah,
it's so good.
He appears literally out of nowhere. You're like, I won't spoil it, but you're like on a planet in the midst of like a sabotage mission, and he literally lands on the windscreen of the vehicle you're currently in, and goes like, "What are you doing? I'm in the middle of something here." It's incredible.
Very Saul Guerrero in his early years.
I just love it. It's like it absolutely nails like the combat and the mechanics of using the Force are just perfect in my opinion.
It feels. I remember the really long ago the first Battlefront. That came out. The one like I played it on PlayStation 2, maybe.
Oh, so like not the EA Star Wars Battlefront, like the Lucasfilm Star Wars Battlefront, like 2005 or whatever.
And I remember playing it as a kid and going, "Wow, I can use Force powers in this game. This is going to be so exciting."
Yeah.
And it felt like really clunky, and I was using like a gun almost.
Yeah, you kind of just like point in that game. You just like pointed at someone and then slashed your lightsaber a bunch.
Yeah.
Like there was not a lot of depth to what you were doing, but yeah, man, Cal's like there's such a strong emphasis on blocking and dodging, which I love in any game. But it feels really appropriate to a Jedi because that's the way that they're trained.
For sure, feels very Dark Soulsy kind of combat.
It's really about timing and parrying and blocking, and it was really hard. At first, when I started playing it, I found it a lot harder than I expected it to be. But yeah, once you start to get the hang of it, it's that really satisfying feeling of going like, oh, I took it down that huge thing using my skills, you know?
Is there a co-op in this? Because I also love the game because...
I think it's only single player.
Maybe the new one will have a co-op.
Ooh.
Do you want to do a
if it's co-op.
Overnight
$1,000,000%.
marathon?
Yeah,
I love it.
Have to do it. Well, that's all we have time for. So we'll catch you next week for more Get Commanded.
Goodbye, Commander players.
Bye.